And we are live with Dr. Matthew Breuninger. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is really cool.
Yeah,
so your doctorate is in what?
Clinical psychology.
Sweet.
So I did a doctorate in clinical psychology at Baylor and an MA in theology at Ave Maria.
Oh, wow,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Did you like Ave Maria?
I loved it. As a graduate student, I loved it.
What year were you there?
2008 through 2010.
Yeah, it's exploded since then.
Has
Have
it
you
really?
been back?
No, I haven't been
Because I
back.
went in 2008 to give a talk at a men's conference.
Okay.
And I went back this summer, and it's a town.
Yeah.
It's almost like the inverse of Steubenville. Steubenville's like this secular town where a bunch of Catholics infiltrated.
Yeah.
Whereas in Ave, I think it was like initially a Catholic town,
Catholics.
but now it's like the fastest growing, or one of the fastest growing towns in Florida.
Fascinating.
So there's tons of people flocking there.
Yeah, when I was there, the grad student housing was sort of about a mile off campus.
Yeah.
It butted up against the swamp. And
Nice.
man, we had some great friends, great times, and just got to meet some great faculty that I didn't even know at the time. You know, guys like Michael Dauphiné and at the time, Father Matt Lamb, just tremendous people. Gregory Vall, biblical scholar. It was a really beautiful time for me. Actually, this is kind of funny, but I had kind of come back to the church and was really interested in studying more theology, but I essentially thought it was, what I realize now is what I wanted was like a catechetics course. So like I wanted to learn about the faith, and I thought I need to get a degree and somebody can teach me more about this faith that I've come to love and appreciate. And so I applied and I got in, and I mean, they're doing theology. I mean, it was the first time I had really seen people take the intellectual life seriously, like as a vocation. Yeah.
Nice.
But here I was thinking it was going to be like, we're going to read a little bit of the catechism and just hear about some of the teachings, and we're diving deep into
So it was kind of like you were after like a podcast.
Exactly.
Like pints.
And
you went.
And I was, before I knew it, I'm taking semesters of Latin so that we can read.
Nice. So is your principal job now, are you a therapist with a practice, or is it teaching at the university?
Yeah, so my principal job is to teach. I teach at the university. I'm in the psychology department. And I'm actually just opening a practice here in Steubenville, a group practice. July 1st is our intended opening date.
Cool.
And I've hired 2 people so far. I'm looking to maybe hire 1 or 2 more. But it's Wellspring counseling and coaching.
I love it.
Yeah. And so I want to just bring really solid mental health care. I want to bring well-trained therapists and clinicians who are comfortable integrating the faith to this area, and just up the game. I mean, there's such a need.
In Steubenville, do we have anything like that?
Nothing like, there are a lot of big corporations that are doing mental health care in the area, but the level of care that I think is being provided, I would say sort of isn't always to the standard that I think it should be. And so I thought I really want to bring really good clinicians here.
How exciting.
Well-trained. Yeah, it's great. So the website's being built right now, Wellspring. We're going to have a coaching component too, so that, look, there's people who might not be struggling with severe psychopathology or mental health issues, but they want some guidance, some help. And so we've developed this, it's like, we're calling it Catholic identity coaching, but the idea is we want to help people rediscover their identity in Christ as beloved sons and daughters of the Father. And so we have this sort of 3-stage model that I've been working on, where the first month you work on rediscovering who the Father is and who you are in light of the Father. The second step is embracing and finding your gifts and talents. And the third month is living in the Spirit, called to service, living in the Spirit. So now that I know who I am, I know my gifts and talents and some of my weaknesses. Like, what am I called to do? How can I live this identity radically as a husband and father, as a teacher, so I want to bring this coaching as well, because not everyone maybe needs the level of care that counseling or therapy provides, but I think this coaching model could be really neat. So
I remember when I first started hearing about coaching, it felt like maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
To me, I was like, what is this gimmick?
Yeah.
People without any qualifications asking for money so they can what?
Matt.
But yeah, so what's been your kind of journey understanding this?
So I think it can be very gimmicky. I think there's a lot of charlatans out there, even in the Catholic world.
Let's name names. No.
Yeah, let's do this. Throw down the therapeutic gauntlet, right? I do. Look, Catholic people are hungry for help. And some of these folks, I think, promote what they do as being very unique. And they use big words like Catholic anthropology.
Mm-hmm.
And so Catholics, in some ways rightly, want a Catholic therapist who they feel safe with and who they feel like will respect their faith and won't invite them to engage in, practices or behaviors that are contrary to the morals of the faith. And so Catholics are sort of hungry for this safe place for therapy. And what I think sometimes happens is you get people who sell a product that doesn't help. They're not great therapists, and they take their sort of subpar therapeutic skills and they wrap it in Catholic language. And
interesting.
Good Catholic people are paying a lot of money for this. They're paying a lot of money, and that to me is
now. Do you find that
unjust?
Yeah. Do you find that you would be in agreement with many Catholic therapists about this thing you're talking about and these people being kind of charlatans? Because the reason I ask that is I imagine people would love it. Like, is there a place that I can go that can help me discern what's going to be actually helpful and what's not?
Yeah.
Or is there not such a place and I just have to figure this out on my own?
I don't think there is yet such a place. And sometimes the people that are anyway, the people that, sometimes, how to say this? The people that are maybe the most prominent, the people that are, it can be deceptive because the folks that you end up encountering and seeing in these spaces are the ones that are putting themselves out there quite a bit. And I think the people that I think maybe are I've been really surprised at how many amazing Catholic therapists I've met who are...
They should have a huge platform, but people have never heard of them.
They're quiet. They're humble.
Give us a couple of names.
Yeah. So down in, where is he? Tennessee, I think he is. Maybe Georgia now. Mario Sacasa. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist, Dr. Mario Sacasa. The guy's great. He's great. Really intelligent, really thoughtful, interested in bringing the faith into therapy in a way that works and fits and is measured and tempered. And he's great. Dr. Ed Rogers, he's down at Baylor. He's the director of their counseling center, or he's the director of clinical training at their counseling center. These are guys who are just you're never gonna hear about them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's kind of true in most fields, though, isn't it? Like the greatest theologians aren't the ones with the greatest websites. Yeah. It's knuckleheads like me. Well, hopefully you're pointing people to the great theologians.
No, right. I mean, look. One benefit of you're using your platform to elevate these folks who wouldn't otherwise be seen and heard. And
how long does somebody? How long would somebody need to be with a therapist or coach until they realize I should be experiencing more help than I'm experiencing? Does that make sense?
It does.
Like someone might be doing this right now.
It does.
How long should they be with this person until they can gauge for themselves this is actually helping?
I don't think it takes very long. Look, I think in the first session, the first time you meet, you should generally get a sense of, is this person genuine? Is this person, are they connecting with me? Do I feel like this person gets me, right? Mm-hmm. There's a sense of sort of therapeutic bond or alliance. This person really is trying to understand my experience. I don't feel like they're sort of coming over the top and taking my problem and sort of fitting it into what they want to treat. They're really hearing me, right? They're really hearing me. You can get the sense of that pretty quickly. And then are we on the same page? Are they sort of hearing my goals? Are they hearing what I want to work on? Are they hearing sort of what I'm saying deeply, and they want to collaborate with me?
That makes sense.
Yeah. And maybe the last thing is, are these assignments they're giving me, is the homework, am I getting a benefit out of it? Yeah. I mean, am I actually noticing change? And do I feel comfortable? Here's a nice little indicator. Do I feel comfortable going back to this therapist or coach and saying, hey, it's not working. Something's not working. If you don't feel comfortable going back and saying that to your therapist or coach, they haven't created the right environment, right? I don't think they've created the right environment. There's not a deep enough or rich enough bond there. And that says something.
I love what you said there, that first point about, are they just trying to fit my problems into their preconceived categories, or are they trying to understand me first? Yeah. Did you watch that show with Will Smith about the doctor? What was that called? Gosh, it'll break you. Who was it? Do you mind looking that up?
Yeah, what was it on?
Apple TV. It's Will Smith and somebody else.
Don't know.
It was a true story about a therapist that just totally took advantage of his clients. And like moved into this guy's summer home.
Yes. I saw a preview
over.
for this on Apple TV. I saw a preview.
Oh my gosh, I didn't breathe for the entire season. Just
it's funny, Britt and I were looking for a show to watch, and we opted for something a little lighter because it just looked, it looked kind of heavy.
It'd be really interesting to get your take on that.
Yeah.
It's funny, when I look for a show these days, I'm like, does it have sex stuff in it?
Yeah.
No, all right, we'll give that a shot,
watching it,
and if it's not like blasphemous or crude.
Yeah.
Did you find it?
Yeah, is it the therapist next, or the
Yes.
chick next?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
I'll have to check it out.
I just wanted to punch that therapist in the face repeatedly.
Dude,
what does that say about
boundary?
Please don't do that.
Can we lay down on this table? Look, I mean, your original question about sort of coaching, I felt the same way, that coaching seemed to me to be a way to just have somebody who isn't trained in anything collect a lot of money. And look, there's big money in training coaches. I mean, the real money is in the people that are creating,
and in the
all
people
these
who are
coaches.
training them. It's like this weird Russian doll situation. It just keeps getting deeper.
So we got all these coaches who have like nobody to treat, but we got these businesses pumping them out. But here's what I wanted to do. I mean, two things. I'll tell you what motivated me. You have to be really careful. There are strict licensure rules, and different states have different laws around how you can practice. And most states, when it comes to therapy and counseling, you can't practice across state lines. You're licensed in a particular state.
Ah, I see.
Right? And so I can do telehealth with anyone in the state of Ohio, but I can't practice with people in California or New Mexico or Arizona. So in some ways, what coaching has become is a backdoor to, because it's an unregulated, unlicensed profession. Which is partially why you have to be careful, right? Because anyone can be a coach. One of the benefits, though, is you can coach anywhere with anyone. And so
when you do a Zoom meeting with a client, you're a coach, essentially, because you can't practice therapy in California.
Yeah. So you have to be really careful. So you have to be really careful what you're doing. And so I would never tell a client,
this is basically therapy, but I'm calling it coaching.
Exactly. I want to be really clear what we're doing. So if we're doing therapy, we're going to have a really clear treatment plan. We're going to, my style changes a little bit in therapy. I tend to be a little less directive in therapy. And this is partially why, for me, I wanted to develop a clear coaching like model and goal. So the goal of our coaching, sometimes coaching is like, we're doing Catholic coaching, Catholic life coaching, which I think ends up being just therapy, but we call it coaching. And that's a problem in my mind. I think somebody has to be really clear. Therapy and counseling looks like this, and coaching looks like this.
Can you give us a sentence summary of each, if you could boil it down? What's therapy, what's coaching, or is that way too difficult?
Well, no, I mean, it's not. I think there's no clear standard out there, right? The market is, so you have some coaches who are essentially doing therapy. When you ask them, what do you do? They say, well, I ask open-ended questions. I try to bring out the obstacles that are impeding this person from having the kind of life they want to have. And so we clarify their goals. We look at the obstacles. We even do some, we look at their thoughts and do some reality testing. Are their thoughts reasonable? Are they rational? Are they helpful, or are they maladaptive? I mean, they're essentially doing like cognitive behavioral therapy. They're just calling it coaching.
And then you might have some bad therapists who are just being like, hey, make your bed and like exercise 3 times a week. So how then would you maybe define coaching and therapy?
Right. So, and that's why what I've done is I think coaching, in my mind, is something very, very specific. I want to have a very specific target for my coaching. So it's not life coaching. We're not doing all of life. If you want to talk about all of life, that's going to be therapy or counseling, and then you're going to have to be in the state of Ohio, right? But coaching here is going to be giving you some tips, tricks, and principles to help you, at least from my view, to help you deepen your identity in Christ. And
Love it.
And so what I'm trying to do personally anyway is try to avoid that confusion. Because look, and the other thing I'd say is this, if you don't belong in coaching, if you have sort of moderate or severe mental health problems, you're not a coaching, you're not a good candidate for coaching. Like somebody who's got sort of mild, maybe low, moderate, but like mild mental health concern, a little bit of anxiety, maybe a little bit of low mood, a little bit of social anxiety, or somebody who has mild mental health problems, you could do coaching with them. And I think it could be reasonable. But sort of personally, if somebody's coming to me saying they want coaching, but we end up spending a lot of time talking about sort of these moderate or severe mental health issues, they need to be referred to counseling or psychotherapy. We shouldn't try to use coaching as a Trojan horse, I don't think.
Yeah.
That's how it's often used, though, as a Trojan horse for therapy, so you can practice across state lines.
That makes sense.
I want to be focused. I want to be really, really tightly focused, because I think that's helpful for clients.
Yeah. Wellspring, what's it going to be called?
Wellspring Counseling and
I
Coaching.
like
It was originally Wellspring Catholic Counseling and Coaching, but I'm afraid that certain folks who might be on the fence,
I agree.
yeah,
I think
that
good.
name could be off-putting.
Yeah, like people who are Catholic and who are looking for a good Catholic therapist or
Yes.
coach will find out about you.
They'll get it.
Yeah.
They'll get it. And, but there's going to be folks who are on the fence, folks who have hurts from the church, and and just folks in town who need help. I mean, we have so many folks on Medicare and Medicaid who just need help, and I want to be able to bring them in the door and help them.
Sweet. And you just started a podcast. I want to bring that up for our viewers.
Sure.
What's it called?
So it's called Ask a Catholic Therapist.
Hey, do you mind looking that up, Neil, and putting that in the description?
I only have
Ask a Catholic Therapist. And what's your experience on YouTube so far? Are you liking it?
So here's what I love, Matt. I love, my favorite part of giving a talk, my favorite part of teaching is the Q&A. I just love the Q&A, right? And so I thought, we were having sort of brunch with the McNamara's one morning, one early afternoon. We're sort of talking about this stuff, and they said, hey, why don't you should do something, like you should get this stuff out there, and you should talk about this, and this is really neat. And so my experience is I love trying to answer questions. I love talking about this stuff. I love bringing together pieces of theology and psychology and trying to think it through on my feet. And
well, buckle up.
Really enjoy that.
We're about to do.
But I will say the whole the platform, like there's a whole part of this that I am just utterly unequipped.
Yeah.
How to upload a video, what do you shoot it in, the quality of my video. I mean, it's all grainy, and I mean, so
but I think
I hope to get better over time.
Yeah, I think better to start like that.
Yeah.
And be sincere and advance.
100%.
Because I think sometimes I think the beauty of YouTube and the appeal of it is how raw it can feel. Sometimes things seem overproduced and you don't trust them.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Like this show. It's definitely not overproduced. We're talking to Neil.
There's a guy back there who's doing everything for
There's actually like 10 people sitting in seats.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, for me, it's like me, and every video like starts with me like reaching out to hit the button,
Yeah.
all grainy and.
No, but that's cool. I really think that's the number one way people succeed on YouTube is by being sincere, not trying to sound like someone else, just being their big, goofy selves, warts and all. People. Otherwise, if you try to be someone in order to cater to everybody, you become as interesting as dentist art.
For sure.
Or as inoffensive.
For sure.
Unoffensive, inoffensive. Do we know what that is?
Inoffensive.
As see, well produced. As like a hotel advertisement. You know when you step into an elevator and you see those big stickers on the inside of the doors? They're so uninteresting.
It's so generic,
because they're so generic. Whereas if people would just be themselves, and just, I think that's what.
It's true, man. And not everyone's gonna like it. Not everyone's gonna appreciate it.
Yeah.
Some people want it longer. Some people want it shorter. Some people want more of this. More.
Yeah.
But I kind of do what I do, and right now it's like once a week when I can get to it.
Nice.
I'm playing around with the format length and all that, but I just like it. And look, I think Catholic people want certain questions answered, and there are plenty of questions that you don't want to pay a therapist $80 to $100 an hour to answer. And if I can sort of try to answer it, or at least give you some way into the question to think about it, Why not, you know?
Well,
Yeah.
on that point, I have asked our supporters on Locals and Patreon, very intelligent, very attractive people. I mean, these people, and
as all patrons are.
They are just become immediately like, if they're a 5, they become a 6. If they're a 7, they become a 9, just by subscribing on Locals or Patreon. Okay, let's have a look here. You haven't seen any of these questions ahead of time.
None of them, which is terrifying.
But we do have about like 40 questions.
Holy smokes!
So, you know, I'm not looking for an extensive answer. For that, people can go to your website. Ask a Catholic therapist. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What do you got?
All right. So this person, who is anonymous, says, "Hello. What would you recommend for those who accompany a loved one with a mental health issue, especially when, due to my attachment style, it's difficult for me to set boundaries and I tend to fall into the savior complex?"
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about attachment. Do you guys know what attachment is?
I mean, I know what physical attachment is.
Yeah.
I think I know what emotional attachment is as well, but why don't you tell us?
Okay, so attachment comes out of, it was really sort of promoted by this guy named John Bowlby, and further developed in humans and among parents and children by this woman named Mary Ainsworth. But here's the gist of attachment. Attachment is the social emotional bond between a child and a caregiver, right? It's the you sort of know it when you see it. And so, if you were to walk in my house and try to pick up my 8-month-old now, he's just coming into this really clear attachment behavior phase, pick up my 8-month-old and grab him and look at him, he would immediately orient toward me and reach out. So attachment is fundamentally, it's about felt security. Feeling safe in your very being. And you see this in children who have secure attachments. Now, there's two ways of sort of thinking about this. One is you can think of secure attachment and insecure attachment, or you could think insecure attachment has sort of subtypes. So you've got avoidant attachment, you've got anxious ambivalent attachment, and something called disorganized attachment. But I think it's easier for just us to think about it in terms of secure and insecure attachment. So if your parents are attuned, that means they see what you need accurately. Like moment by moment, they see what's actually like going on. What are your deep needs? Right? And this is tough with kids because sometimes kids are crying when they're scared, but we think that they're tired. Or sometimes kids are tired, but we think they're hungry or something. And even as adults, right, seeing what somebody actually needs, being deeply attuned to them, that communicates security. I see what you need. So if our parents are attuned, they're warm or empathic. So you don't just need to see the need, you need to respond then in a way that's like warm, not cold and distant, not rigid and detached, not sort of chaotic and frantic and anxious. You respond with warmth and empathy, and then they respond consistently. So those three things, attunement, warmth, and consistency. If parents do this, you're likely to have a secure attachment. And what that means is you will feel in times of threat or distress, you will orient toward your caregiver. You'll turn toward them. You'll seek proximity. You'll view them as a safe haven, like a place of emotional and physical safety. You'll feel like a deep sense of I'm okay, like I'll be okay. And so here's the beautiful thing. When we get this from our parents and we have a secure attachment is correlated with all sorts of positive outcomes. We have lower rates of depression, anxiety, stress. You have overall better mental health if you have a secure attachment. You also are more likely to have like better relationships. So here's what's fascinating. Here's a dynamic you oftentimes see. Somebody's got an anxious attachment, which means they're really worried that you're going to leave them. You're not going to be there for them. You're not going to respond to them the way they need. You're not seeing what they need. They're anxious. So folks with anxious attachments, they lean in really hard. Hey, are you there? Are you there? You didn't respond. Are we going to be okay? Is everything all right? So they're leaning in. Somebody who's got an avoidant attachment in times of anxiety or stress pulls back. And so sometimes you see in relationships, friendships, marriages, an avoidant and an anxious attachment style. And that can be like gasoline and fire, because in times of stress or strain or threat, the avoidant person leans in and says, hey, are we okay? Is everything okay? Are we doing okay? The anxious person pulls back. The avoidant person pulls back and says, whoa, 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 which only confirms for the anxiously attached person something's wrong. So they lean in even harder, and the avoidant person then pulls back even more, and you've got this just vicious cycle, right? So this is attachment. Attachment is all about felt security. Fascinating aside, maybe. I have some academic articles on attachment because I think it's just fascinating and really important. But a number of studies suggest that your attachment style serves as your template for how you're attached to God. So we think about attachment in human terms, parent, like caregiver, child. But in our faith, monotheistic faith, but particularly in Christianity, we've called God Father. We call church Mother, or we have the Blessed Mother. So God is a divine caregiver. We can have an attachment style with God. And the question is, in our relationship with God, are we securely attached, where in times of threat or distress, we turn to him and we feel safe and secure, like deeply? Do we have an anxious attachment? We're afraid he's going to leave us. We're afraid if we don't constantly impress him, if we're not constantly living up, he's going to leave. What if he leaves? What if he's not there? What if I've offended him? Or do we have an avoidant attachment? Just like, I don't view you as a comforting figure. Let's just keep our distance. And what's fascinating about that is sometimes people with anxious attachments can look like the holiest people. They're in the church all the time. They're constantly praying the rosary there. But it's driven by fear that if I don't stay close, if I don't cling to you really, 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 really hard, you're going to leave me. So what the research has found is that we tend, right? This is on average, to have an attachment style to God that corresponds to our attachment to our caregivers. So if I were to measure your attachment style, if you were to measure mine, if we were to measure our children's attachment styles, we tend to have the same attachment style with God that we have with earthly caregivers. And this sort of makes sense, right? Our attachments with early caregivers serves as a template or a pattern for how we can expect God to respond. I mean, it's all we have early on, right? So our sons or our daughters, when they hear the word father, right? Their image of father right now is this. Does my dad see what I need? Right? When my daughter goes moping by or sulking by quietly, do I just say like, oh, she's fine, she's quiet? Or do I say, hey babe, come here. What's going on? You're really, really angry right now. I can tell. What's up? Come here, sit down. Right? Let's talk. Or I know I said what I said before really, really bothered you. Come here, let's talk. Do I consistently respond by seeing her needs and responding in a warm way? If I do, when she hears God the Father, her pattern, her image for God the Father is going to be, oh, I know what father is. Yeah. Right? Or if I respond inconsistently, angrily, cold or distant, if I'm really punitive, she's going to say, oh, I know how to react. I know how to relate to God the Father. Right? It'd be great if we just read the scriptures and formed our own.
Yeah.
Right? But we use...
Yeah, we come to know about God through relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
What's your advice to parents who feel terribly discouraged about what you've just said, since none of us are perfect and none of us see our children's needs, are empathetic, we are frantic at times, we do yell at times. Yeah. How do we deal with that?
Yeah. Two things about that. The first is, I think, generally learning this stuff can help us see our children differently. The truth is, so many of the things that frustrate me and my parent, and let me back up even further. The first is being aware of our own attachment styles, right? It's really easy for me to bring my image of my father and my mother into how I parent, right? I can let my attachment style, right, if it's insecure, affect how I interact with my children. So being mindful of our own attachment styles, taking time to think about it. There's a couple books out there on this. There's a book called Attached. I don't remember the author right now. But learning about your attachment style can be really helpful, because if you have an avoidant attachment and your child's really coming to you with needs, you might feel the desire to pull back. Or if your child has really big feelings or emotions and you have an anxious attachment style, that can make you feel really, really uncomfortable. And so you like draw them really, really close, but then you're really anxious. And so then it's not making them feel safe or comfortable. So being mindful of your own attachment style can help you pause before you want to react or respond to your child. Right?
Are we looking at Attached by Amir Levine, Dr. Amir Levine?
Yes.
And Rachel S.F. Heller, M.A.
Yes. Yeah. So learn about your own attachment style first, right?
And I would imagine too, like, the question I just had then was, what do you say to those who feel kind of discouraged because they know they're not perfect? I imagine, and you tell me what you think, how we react to that anxiety probably says something about our own attachment.
100%. Right? Yeah, 100%. And look, here's the good news about attachment. We can change. They're sometimes called these internal working models, these templates for how relationships work. We can change them. Now they're deeply embedded in us from early childhood, but they're not immovable. They can change, and they change with experience. You don't sort of think your way into a new attachment style. You act your way into a new attachment style. So maybe I feel anxious. Maybe I feel like I want to avoid sort of a big emotional thing that's happening right now. I stop. I take a breath. I realize that this is part of my attachment style, right? Or maybe related to my attachment style. And I make an effort to say, I'm going to lean into this moment. I'm going to actually approach my child. I'm going to try to use a calm voice. So if you're feeling discouraged about this, like, look, start by learning a little bit about your own attachment style and how that may be shaping your parenting, because it can change. It can change. So there's hope, right?
Yeah,
it can change.
Great.
The second thing, right, is, and this is probably the most important thing in parenting, Matt, if you had to sort of boil it down. Maybe the two most important things. Attachment being one, but related to attachment is rupture and repair.
Yeah.
Right, man, look, we're always going to fail. Matt, I fail daily to love each of my kids the way they need to be loved. I bring my own baggage. I bring my own, hurts and wounds. I'm reactive. I'm filled with fear. I'm impatient. The difference between good parents and parents that are not as good as they should be, or parents who need to grow even more, is good parents, when they rupture, and we're always rupturing. Ruptures are big or small too. Obviously a blow up is a rupture, but when my son comes by and he says, "Hey Dad, I fixed my go-kart today." And I go, "Oh, cool, buddy." And then I turn to something else really quick, and he's left feeling like, "Oh, Dad doesn't care. Dad doesn't see me.
Mm-hmm.
Dad doesn't appreciate me." That's a rupture. That's a little rupture, right? So ruptures can be big, they can be small, but what matters is, and for those of you that are discouraged out there, what matters is the good parents repair. That's the most important thing.
I love it.
Not rupturing. You're always going to rupture.
Yeah.
And we do this with our spouses. We do, right? It's about repair. It's about going back and saying, "Hey, bud, I freaking messed up. You were super excited when I came in, and I feel like I missed that. Come here, show me what's happening."
Yeah, that's really
with
good.
With our spouses, dude, like, "Babe, sorry, when you told me before that you were feeling overwhelmed, I feel like I was just really distracted and I wasn't listening. I'm sorry."
Yeah.
Can you tell me?
Would you use the word reattaching, or is that maybe
Yeah,
it depends
could.
how you use the word attachment?
It depends on the
but
word, right?
Yeah, you're sort of okay. So you're repairing the rupture, is what you would say.
And that is part of what that creates, right? Is a secure attachment, because this person knows you're safe. You're safe. I can turn to you in times of threat or distress and experience safety.
What do you say to parents who say, I can't apologize to my children?
Yeah.
Because if I do that, I'm showing weakness. I'm not the infallible. I'm not the kind of disciplinarian I should be.
For sure.
And it takes the attention off the thing they did that was legitimately wrong and onto me.
Yeah. So
how do we grow in humility as parents while maintaining our authority?
Yeah, I think part of it is getting really clear on what we think discipline is. And this is like I was just down in Houston a couple of weeks ago giving a talk to some for some Opus Dei folks and parents who came to the center of study down there on this sort of very topic, discipline. And it's contentious, right? Because we have a lot invested in discipline. We've been disciplined certain ways, and so it can feel disloyal to our parents if we criticize the way that they've disciplined us.
We've disciplined in certain ways that to acknowledge the wrong ways we've done it just brings shame.
Dude, exactly, right? And so we don't want to say that I've been doing it wrong for the past 15 years of my child's life.
Face what that means.
So look, I think discipline is about teaching. And so the question is, what do I want to teach? Do I want to teach my kids just simply not to do wrong things?
Mm-hmm.
No. For me, I want to teach my kids how to flourish. And so for me, what that means is I want to teach my kids how to cope with big feelings. I want to teach my kids how to express big feelings in healthy and appropriate ways. For me, that means I want to model how to repair relationships that have been ruptured. So what's amazing is, right, we sometimes underestimate how important modeling is. Our kids look at us.
Oh, yeah.
And our words, if we spoke less and focused on like living well more, they look so deeply at how we act. And so the great irony is when my boys are fighting, right, I'll say, you know, buddy, you really messed up there. You need to apologize to your brother. It's really important when you make a mistake to apologize, to admit the wrong you've done, right? And this, by the way, is going to ultimately like undergird how my kids think about confession as well, don't it, right? Lord, I'm sorry I messed up. So I tell this to my boys, and then when I mess up, obviously, and everyone knows it, like there's, right, the kids know it, my wife knows it, right? She gives me this sort of knowing smirk. We all know I messed up, and I go,
no, digging my heels in.
I don't apologize because I'm going to undermine my authority. Look, just watch what happens.
What's ironic is you not apologizing is what undermines your authority.
100%. Because your kids look, they think you're a hypocrite. You want me to apologize when I do a wrong, but you don't apologize when everyone sees that you've done something wrong, when you've clearly done something wrong.
Yeah.
We're not modeling. So I want my kids to see. Now, after I apologize, it doesn't mean that what my child has done is right. It doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be instruction or maybe even a consequence. But I can say, buddy, I approached that wrongly. I'm sorry. I messed up. I raised my voice, or I yelled, or I was impatient and I shouldn't have been. Right? I'm sorry. And then I say something like, okay, but now we still need to talk about the thing you did, right?
Yeah. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
So,
but going back all the way, right? I give the attachment foundation here. Remind me the first part of the question.
It's like, how does she journey with somebody with mental health issues?
Yes. Yeah. So I think that maybe
while setting boundaries.
Yeah.
You know?
So look, reading about your attachment style, understanding your attachment style, finding someone in your life who you can have a secure attachment to. So while you're dealing with sort of the stresses of accompanying somebody with a mental health problem, you can turn back to this person and reestablish a sense of sort of, I'm okay, it's all right. But here's the other thing. I think, accompanying people with mental health issues, we have to relate. It's about relating to them. It's about providing them some support. But if you find yourself feeling incredibly overwhelmed, incredibly anxious, it can be really helpful to have support in your life, right? Someone outside of you who can help you see this and pull you back a little bit and say, hey, we can learn boundaries from people outside of us saying, hey, it feels like you're getting sucked in a little too deep. Why don't you pull back? Knowing where the line is and saying, hey, I want to walk with you, but you also need to be seeing a counselor or therapist. And I want to support you in whatever way I can in helping you get there. But I'm not your counselor or therapist. So when we get into topics that I don't know about, I don't have an answer for, I can just say, hey, I don't know. That sounds really tough. Have you called your therapist? Have you called your counselor? And then you have to find someone you can turn to help you sort of discern whether or not you're maintaining healthy boundaries. But I think boundaries are tough. We grow up with a sense of boundaries, and sometimes the boundaries we've grown up with are unhealthy. And so having healthy boundaries can feel really mean or uncomfortable, depending partially on our attachment style. But other folk, if you have an avoidant attachment style, you might draw really strong boundaries. And what you're being invited to is actually lean in more deeply. And so it's going to depend partially on her attachment style. And if she discerns her attachment style, discerns the wrong word. If she figures out what her attachment style is, she can learn whether or not she needs to lean in more and just learn to hold the uncomfortableness, or whether or not she needs to pull back and actually not be so sort of anxiously involved or potentially controlling, or So it's going to depend on the attachment style. But here's what you do. You slowly work toward developing a secure attachment so that you can be a place, a holding environment for somebody who's struggling.
Yeah.
And I think you can accompany them best from that place.
Thank you. That was really great. I can see why you can't just answer these questions in 5 minutes, because now I have a totally new view on what attachment is. Yeah. I literally said to you, I know about physical attachment, so that's what I knew about. Well, you know what? That's really helpful. Thank you.
You know what bothers me is these sometimes I hear these sort of, it was really popular in Catholic mom circles at some point, like we do attachment parenting. And what people sort of thought that meant was just like,
right, like that's the only kind of parenting there is, right? The only good parent.
Right. I mean, look, if you smoke crack and beat your kids, you're doing attachment parenting. Everyone's doing attachment parenting, right? It's just, you're either fostering a secure attachment or an insecure attachment, right? I mean, but what these moms meant was like, we baby wear and co-sleep. That's what they meant. Like, And I think attachment it goes well beyond
really
that
cool
stuff. Well beyond
just a quick follow-up. Because I think I grew up with, maybe some unhealthy attachment from parents. But then I found a friend's mum who was she saw me, and I just love her for that. So that was my question to you.
This is so healing. Yeah, Matt, this is those internal working models I was talking about, the patterns or templates we have for how relationships work. Can I share big feelings? Is anger okay to express? What do I do with confusion? What do I do with fear? What do I do with that internal working model, while deeply rooted, is still flexible, and healthy relationships with people who we can have a secure attachment with begin to change them, reshape it. Yeah. And so this woman in your life, a good spiritual director, a good priest, a good youth minister, a friend who and just reshape us.
I was listening to Bob Schutz, Dr. Bob Schutz, who we've had on the show. Somebody asked him the question, like, how do I get over the fact that I've done so much to my children to hurt them? And he offered a very powerful example in the video, which I won't rehash. Yeah. But his point to this person was, what would it mean for you if your father, after 45 years or whatever, came to you, looked you in the eye, and meant it when he said, I'm so sorry.
Rupture.
I know I've screwed up. And I was wrong too. Like, how many times, the question he asked was, how many times would he have to do that? And what would that mean for you? This person was essentially like, that would mean everything. For sure. So his point to them was like, you're not beyond hope. No, because it just takes that one sincere act. Now you might be angry, and that you might have to work through that.
For sure.
But just think about what that means after 40 years of bad parenting. Yes. So don't give up. Don't be discouraged.
Don't be discouraged. Look, that's a great example. I mean, the rupture and repair. We can always repair. And repair sometimes takes time, given the nature of the damage we've done or how much damage we've done. But you can start today. I mean, for those of us that have young kids, for those of us who have college age kids, you can start today.
That's beautiful, man.
Starting to repair, right? And by repairing, you're reshaping their model for how they think relationships work.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Hey, I got a question about narcissism, because it feels like a buzzword today. Everywhere I look, someone's talking about this person's a narcissist, that person has narcissistic tendencies. Yeah. I don't know if we even know what we mean. I was on YouTube and I saw a bunch of videos like 5 ways to know if your parent was a narcissist. And I thought to myself, there's that crummy part of all of us that would very much like to blame everybody but ourselves. And so I would imagine videos like that do really well, because you're the victim and your parent is the perpetrator. And there's certainly elements in which that's true. Sure. What is a narcissist? Like, really?
Well, do I have the DSM? Do we have the DSM?
We do not.
I think I might have it in my bag.
Are you serious? Can I grab it? Please go grab the DSM-5 from your bag. Ridiculous. Just don't headbutt the camera when you come back in, because that'll hurt.
Matt, should that be the name of the clip? Is how to know if your parents are narcissists?
Definitely.
But it's actually just this.
Definitely. That's the clip.
Let's see.
And then Dr. Breuninger pulls out the DSM-5.
You never leave home without it, right? Here we go. It's under personality disorder. So,
how long is this going to take you to look up? Because I want to know how much dead air I got to fill.
Just start talking.
So, Neil, do you agree that you're hearing that term a lot more? Narcissist?
Well, I don't take this the wrong way, but I feel like I was hearing that like a year ago. It seemed like a big
I thought you were going to say, don't take this the wrong way, but I think you're a narcissist. And that would have made for a very uncomfortable video.
Okay.
No, okay, fair enough. Yeah.
But yes,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So you sort of had two questions. One I would say is this. Yeah, I think, look, the mental health field is sort of exploding now, right? In some ways, rightfully so. We're now recognizing that, look, mental health is important. We need to be paying attention to these things. And you're getting these buzzwords and phrases, borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality traits. And people are, again, look, there's money to be made. There's clicks to be had. And sometimes these terms and categories really do help make sense of our experience, right? They do. I want to bracket your second question though, which is like, at what point do we stop blaming our parents and because I want to get to that. I think that's really important. I think it's really important. I mean, I have a theory on it that you could take it or leave it, but so the DSM, I'll just read. So this is sort of, the handbook for diagnosing mental health issues, mental illness, and narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, falls under the personality disorder section. There was debate, and this is not infallible, by the way. It should be incredibly, I can't say it emphatically enough that there's all sorts of conceptual unclarity on where the boundaries of one disorder sort of lie. And the goal of this was to make things clearer. And it has in some ways, right? It's tried to standardize some language, some description, but how this was developed, some of the categories are developed through what they call expert consensus, which is just like, here's what us group of experts tend to think this is. Other categories were developed through more empirical method, like actual studies. And
so that you're granted, right? It's a political document in some sense as well.
Yeah, 100% too. Politics play, right? Which groups? Okay.
That said, yeah, it's not useless.
It's not useless. But also there was some debate over the personality disorder section over whether they were going to make it dimensional, meaning right now it's categorical. Like you've got this thing or you don't. So narcissistic personality disorder, you've got it or you don't. To your point, maybe, it may be that we sort of all have some traits, right? Another way to think about personality is we've all got sort of some of these like common set of traits, but we have them in varying degrees. And so somebody with narcissism has really, really high sort of narcissism as a trait, and maybe really low empathy for others, and maybe really low, like the other levels are lower, narcissism is really high. There are times when we all sort of can fall into narcissism. So we may all have the trait to some extent. My point is, this is talked about sort of categorically as you got it or you don't. But you might look at somebody, the problem with thinking about it like that is you might look at somebody and say, wow, that was a kind of narcissistic thing to do. You must have NPD. Versus saying, look, we all have times or contexts or situations where the trait might be a little higher at certain times.
That sounds way more helpful.
I think it is.
But putting it categorically helps us understand the definition.
Right. Here's the diagnostic criteria. It's a pervasive pattern of grandiosity in fantasy or behavior, a need for admiration, a lack of empathy, beginning by early adulthood. And you see it in a variety of contexts. And then you have to have 5 or more of these following traits: a grandiose sense of self-importance, preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, ideal love, believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by other special or high status people or institutions, requires excessive admiration. This is like academia, right? Has a sense of entitlement, unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations, is interpersonally exploitative, takes advantage of others to achieve your own ends, lacks empathy, is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of him or her, shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes.
Yeah, so you can't point to any one of those. Right. I mean, anyone who prays the litany of humility
you're
gets
dying
kicked
right now.
in the guts.
Exactly.
And so the idea that, I've never expressed any of that or experienced any of that is obviously.
Right. And
that's why I like what you said about degrees.
It's dimensional, right? And so like, I can be haughty sometimes. I can be grandiose sometimes. I can be, what's key in this definition, right, is a pervasive pattern that extends into multiple contexts. So sometimes when I'm feeling particularly insecure about something, maybe in a particular context, I'm haughty or I overemphasize my achievements, but if at home I'm not like that, if with my good friends I'm not like that, you'd say like, you don't have NPD. We're talking about when you see it, you know it. I mean, this is a person who across contexts exhibits this profound sense of grandiosity, haughtiness, lacks empathy, doesn't see other, really exploitative, always making it about them, needs admiration constantly. And you see it throughout their life, regardless of where they are, at work, at home, with friends, so that's what sort of separates what you might say like clinical NPD from like what most of us have. And one of the traditional conceptions of the cause of NPD is that it's rooted ultimately in sort of deep insecurity.
100%.
Deep insecurity.
I mean, that's what's funny.
Yeah,
we would love to kind of draw a line across humanity and say, those are evil and we're good. They tried that when they threw everyone in Australia. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work because, as you say, like if I have a need to assert my own importance, that clearly comes from a wound that says you're not important. People won't want to spend time with you or waste time with you.
Yes, 100%.
So,
And so, look, it's really hard to treat clinically. It's tough because you have to establish the kind of relationship where the person ultimately feels comfortable enough with you to maybe admit some of these insecurities, which is the very thing they're defending against. Their entire life is structured. Their entire personality has been structured to defend against that feeling.
Yeah.
But you had a question.
So the question is, how do we... How do we not just fall into being the victim and blaming our parents? Because obviously we're incentivized to that.
Right.
If I get to be the victim, then I get to be something of a martyr.
Right.
And I get to point my finger at others away from myself.
Yeah, no, and that's really nice. And this isn't to downplay that we can be and are oftentimes hurt by others, but I think, and I've tried to work this out in a popular book. I have a popular book coming out hopefully this summer. And part of what I try to work out in this book is that a lot of the hurts, the anxiety, the feelings we've had, the anxiety, the depression, the social anxiety, in some ways, we set ourselves up. And I sort of refer to them in the book as secondary wounds. I think primary wounds are the wounds that others do unto us when they fail to love us the way we're intended to be loved.
Yes.
Right? And that's real. We're not loved the way we're created to be loved, and so we get wounded. That's a primary wound. But when we're wounded or hurt, we want to avoid the hurt. We want to avoid the pain. We want to find security. And so we adopt all sorts of dimensions to our personality, behaviors, right? We inflate certain things. We underplay certain things. And I think we do those to feel safe. But because what we oftentimes do when we're trying to create safety for ourselves is go to the extremes with certain things, we're more likely to position ourselves to be hurt by others. So let me give a simple example. Imagine you're sort of bullied in grade school, and you think you aren't good enough. And that's a painful belief. It's just a deep, painful belief. You're not good enough. You're not likable. So you have a primary wound of being bullied, right? You weren't loved by people the way you were created to be loved. But then here's what you do. You decide, well, I'm going to show people how lovable. I'm never going to feel that feeling again. I'm going to show you how lovable I am. I'm going to show you how valuable I am. I'm going to show you how good I am. And so you just excel at school. You excel at sports. You dress suave. You present yourself well. You're constantly trying to show others, look, I'm good. I'm valuable. But what you simultaneously do by trying to so excessively show others your value and worth, what you simultaneously do is you create anxiety in yourself because you have to impress everybody at all times so that you don't feel that feeling of not being good enough. So what happens when you walk into the room and somebody just they're not buying it?
Yeah.
Right? They're not interested in your story.
They're dismissive of you.
They're dismissive of you. They're not. Well, now you feel this, you feel anxious. Right? Like I got to impress everyone in here, or now you feel hurt. How to go home? You say, babe, did you see that guy's real? Look at him. I mean, he's kind of distant. He's not much of a, how about him? Right. So now we're saying like, look what a terrible person that was. But why do we think that? Why do we feel hurt by them? We feel hurt by them because I think oftentimes we set ourselves up, right, through excessively pursuing self-preservation strategies. We set ourselves up to be hurt. right? So, and I can do that. I do this. I'll walk into a room and I want to be admired, and there's just somebody who's not paying attention to me.
And you might have 300 eyeballs on you loving what you're saying, but for some reason that one guy...
Dude. I'm like, why? Did that one guy really... What happens is I end up becoming a slave to everything outside of me. I mean, here's the problem. Matt, the word that...
What a wonderful insight. That's
the word
so
for
true.
me is freedom. I mean, this word kept coming up when I was working on the book, freedom. And there's a passage in Galatians, I think it's like 5:16, 5:13.
Quick glance at Neil.
Yeah, Neil. 5:16, where St. Paul says, "You were created for freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom for things of the flesh, but in service of God." Love and service of God. I love this idea that we're created for freedom. And part of what freedom is in my mind, Matt, is we're not constantly being reactive to our wounds.
Yep.
And I don't think healing actually means that we get rid of all of our wounds. I don't think healing means that we always get rid of bad feelings.
Right.
In fact, I think a lot of times the healing we achieve is we don't have to be reactive to our wounds. I can feel insecure and I don't have to walk into a room and convince everyone that I'm the biggest guy.
I'm just thinking right now, like, it's like Twitter exists to beat your wounds in the face and have you react immediately.
For sure.
And that's,
For
you know
sure.
what I'm saying?
For
Have you ever been on Twitter?
Yeah.
It's a cesspool.
Briefly.
It's the worst
I tried to get on
back and forth.
to get like, there's an academic Twitter. And so
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's like this whole, I'm like, directors of teaching excellence. So I do this part-time thing at the university, director of teaching excellence. All these directors of teaching excellence have Twitter accounts and they share resources. But then I sort of like, all sorts of there's all these sub-Twitters, right? So that there's Black Twitter, there's academic Twitter, there's conservative Twitter.
Catholic,
and
people say Catholic Twitter.
Now these things start man, I could not handle it long, Matt. The
isn't
account's
it
still
funny?
there, but I haven't looked.
It's almost like it's so popular because, as one person said to me, humility rarely goes viral. So if you want to do well on Twitter, you have to say inflammatory things, which I've done, I'm sure, and you have to respond in an inflammatory way. They have this thing on Twitter where you quote tweet somebody.
Okay.
So you can like say something about somebody's tweet.
Okay.
That exists solely, almost exclusively, to slam dunk somebody else's stupid thing.
Poke their thing.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
I love what you said there. About 2 months ago, I stopped reading YouTube comments. Changed everything.
No, I think so.
Because now what I do is I go to people who I love and who I trust their opinion, not some dude with 3 YouTube followers who said something inflammatory.
Dude.
I'm like, Neil, did I just cut that guy off way too much in that interview? Or did I cross a line?
Yes.
And I love that feedback from because I want that feedback. But if you're like, it's almost like YouTube is a microcosm for life. If I'm just going to respond to a billion external stimuli, I won't know who I am or what I'm doing. I certainly won't be free.
And the things you're going to zero in on, by the way, potentially the things you zero in on are the things that like poke our wounds the most.
Yeah, totally.
And so what I want is I want freedom. I want to be able to not have to bite on every comment that's critical of me. I want to be able to not have to bite on that. That guy talks too much. That guy's an idiot. That guy. And I'm going to show you how I'm not an idiot. I'm going to tell you about my degrees, and I'm going to use big words. And instead of just saying like, you know what? Gosh, that hurts. That definitely kind of pokes that old wound. But the freedom is to be able to say, I don't have to respond. I'm not a slave to my environment anymore, right? So either we're free, and that means I can respond how and to what degree and when I want, or I'm a slave to my environment. And that means that if you say something I don't like, I have to respond. If you poke a wound, I have to respond. If you touch an insecurity, I have to respond. I don't want to be the plaything of life. I don't want life to be... Right?
Fantastic.
People have these puppet strings on me. And what I want to do is I want to cut them, and I want to have the freedom to go where God calls me and to respond the way God wants me to respond. And that means oftentimes I bring my hurts and I bring my wounds and I bring bad feelings with me. Right? It's not about getting rid of those. Right? Can I walk into a room? Can I walk into a party? Can I walk into a classroom?
I love that.
And be...
So what you're saying is, you're not free when the bad feelings cease. You're free when you're not reacting immediately to that bad feeling. You're you're self-aware of what's going on.
I think healing isn't just freedom from bad feelings, right? Sometimes we get that. Sometimes we get that, and that can be helpful, and God does this, and for sure.
Purgatory will do that if we don't get
if we don't get it here, we'll get
Yeah.
it there. It's not just freedom from bad feelings, though. It's also freedom to respond, right? So St. Paul is a great example of this. He has this thorn in the flesh.
Yeah.
And, there's debate over what this
Sure.
is, but the Lord doesn't, at least as long as we have St. Paul's letters, he doesn't seem to take it away during the time period that St. Paul's writing. And so we say, like, does God leave St. Paul unhealed? And I think the answer is no. I think what God gives St. Paul, right, my grace is sufficient for you. I think what he gives him is the freedom to go wherever he calls him and not have to react to what people are doing or saying. So if it's lust, imagine it's lust or something like this. And God says, hey, you're going to Rome. And he's like, what? I'm going to Rome. Like, that place is a cesspool, I got to go to Rome. I can't go to Rome. You see, I've got this wound. I got this. Freedom is being able to say, I'll go and I'll bring my suffering with me. I'll bring these uncomfortable feelings with me. I'll go and I'll bring these insecure thoughts with me. Most of what we do is we try to avoid bad thoughts, bad feelings, bad memories. And so our life becomes a life of avoiding bad things, right? Not like morally bad things, but just like uncomfortable things. And I think what that does is that sets us up to be hurt by others. Like, rather than recognizing I've actually set myself up to be hurt. And how I approach people. So if I have to impress you, if I come in here today and I go, I got to impress Matt Fradd. I got to freaking impress this guy, right? I can't feel insecure. I can't feel stupid. I have to have an answer for everything. I got to impress this guy. If I'm looking at you across the table and I'm like, he doesn't seem impressed. And then I go home, I go, that guy's just dismissive, babe. Man, he doesn't, right? If I have to impress you, I'm setting myself up to be hurt by you.
I see.
Right? It's a setup job. Because you might not live up to what I think I need.
Yeah.
Right? Or if I need to, we do this, we pull in the opposite direction too. We'll pull back. We'll get shy and quiet. We'll just totally be reserved. I'm just not going to say anything because I don't want people to think I'm stupid. I don't want people to think that what I say is disinteresting. But then we feel isolated. We feel alone. And we say things like, well, people just don't want to hang out with me. People don't want to. You say, well, it's because you're not putting yourself out there.
Discerning that stuff is so tough.
Yeah, it is. To what extent are we contributing?
Have you begun to realize when you'll say something to your wife, say at the end of the night, like, is there like things that you say that you then catch yourself at? Because you've used that example a couple of times, which I really like. Yeah. Babe, like that guy was so...
100%.
Yeah, it's almost like we should always stop and be like, what's that bringing up in me?
100%. So whenever I'm feeling hurt or wounded or insecure, I'm in the habit now of sort of saying, did I have an expectation? Did I come into a situation with an expectation? So I walk in, I expect everyone here to respect me. That's a setup. It's an absolute setup. Because there might be people in the room who are disinterested, who don't respect me, who don't understand me.
Or they might be tired. Like maybe it's not about you.
Matt, 100%.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's not about me. So I set myself up. And when I walk in with expectations, when I walk in trying to create security through what I call sort of excessive control strategies, right? Be impressive, be quiet. Like so now I've started to do sort of a daily, when I'm on my spiritual game, this is a daily thing for me. It's recognizing when are my self-preservation strategies? When are my excessive control strategies? When is my seeking safety setting me up to be wounded, hurt, or disappointed in others?
Wow.
Fear's it. Look, when I go into a situation with fear, I can parent out of fear, right? When I go home and I come in with fear instead of faith. I walk in and I'm afraid. Look, I come from a very well-educated family. All my uncles went to, Yale, Columbia, Georgetown, Johns Hopkins. Like education was really important to my family, really like get a good education, succeed, right? I've realized in myself, right? Yeah. I come home, I say to the kids, hey guys, tell me about your day at school. And they're like, we did a little math, right? They seem totally disinterested.
I want to play Zelda.
I want to play Zelda. Yeah. So yeah, my son will say, Dad, it's a really cool thing. Yeah, I did math, but then I looked at my Zelda book and I drew this thing. And did you know in level 8,
yes. No, dude, beautiful.
And I react.
We have the same age son, so we're speaking the same language.
And I react really poorly.
Yes.
I shut it down. So I get angry.
So it's here's what I love, and Dad doesn't care about it.
Dad doesn't care. But you know why I don't care? You know why I get so angry, because I came in with fear. My fear is this is one of my deep fears. I've had to work on this. If my kids don't sort of achieve a real sort of high educational attainment, right? If they don't go to a great college, if they don't get a master's degree or doctoral degree, then they're not good enough. That's my fear.
And if your wife's aware of that fear, that's a lot of pressure to put on your homeschooling wife,
100%,
right? And me too. I'm not
100%.
Yeah. Somebody said this to me once. It was a really great point. He said, we should, as fathers, condescend into our children's interests in the way that God the Father condescended in Christ to our level. So when my son is telling me about Zelda or Minecraft, there's this thing in me that's like, screw Minecraft, like read Shakespeare.
Right. and it's almost always my fear. It's always
it's like, totally
what if
about
I put
me.
you into the world? What if I put you into the world and people know you're my son and you're not blank?
You know what's funny is I have
that's
tons of wounds and I react, but it's interesting. Like that's not one of mine.
Yeah.
It's nice to realize what's not your wounds,
100%.
because that way you realize you're not just reading everything into your own stuff. I definitely have stuff. That's okay, because that's not one of mine. So what are mine?
Yeah, that's mine. The education one. And we were sitting around the table, and I was asking the kids, like, what are the tell me the prepositions. Give me I learned my prepositions in 7th grade. Mr. Barrett, God rest his soul, taught us the alphabetical order: aboard, about, above, across, after, against, along, right. And I was like, hey guys, what are the prepositions? And they were like, they're like below, after. And so what does that do? When they're kind of given this sloppy, it hits my fear. They're not going to be smart. They're not being it. They don't memorize. They don't.
Is it more they will know they're my kids, or is it I'm screwing up? Like I'm not doing a good enough job?
For me, it's both. It's I'm not doing a good enough job, and it's people are going to think I'm not doing a good enough job.
Oh, brother,
what happens when they encounter, Dr. So-and-so or Dr. So, and so I parent out of fear. But the truth is, man, all that is a setup. I'm setting myself up to be hurt, disappointed. Babe, I said, babe, the kids they just don't care. They're not interested. They don't pay attention to me when I teach them. No, I'm walking in with fear, and I'm parenting out of fear instead of love. I'm parenting out of fear instead of faith. And the simple fact is, my kid might be a mechanic. Like my kid loves small engines. Freaking loves small engines, Matt. And like to be totally okay with that.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
To be excited with him and for him and work on this.
100%.
Yeah.
We're both going to say that back and forth. If somebody can tell us in the comments section how many times the word 100% was used, I will send you a free beer stein.
Do I say 100% a lot?
Yeah, but I like it. But I just started saying it. 100%.
I have friends who are like really, I hang out with a lot of these guys in philosophy who are like, have a lot of like epistemic skepticism. And so they'll believe, they would, when you say 100%, they'd be like 99.9, but never 100, Matt.
Hey, let me share with you something that came up in me this morning, and I want to get you to maybe diagnose it if that's okay.
Yeah, I got the DSM.
So I was in the shower and I just felt this shame. And here's why. I realized that over the last few nights, I haven't prayed with my kids. And I then think immediately of those other families in town who I know do pray with their kids. And what's more, they pray without their kids without getting frustrated at their kids. So the best I can manage when I do pray with my kids at night is to do it, but I get angry and snappy.
Grit my teeth, snap,
And I just felt, oh God, I suck. Like why? And I didn't say that out loud. It's like if that was explicit in my head, I would have acknowledged it as, okay, that's not true. But it was just like this sinking feeling of I'm failing. And if I walk around feeling like I'm failing, that's not a great way to begin to succeed.
No.
And so I started to say, okay, well, all right, like Cammie, my wife's sick, and like we've had a lot on lately, like so maybe it's okay. But it's almost like I'm reasoning with the devil at that point. And it wasn't working.
Yeah. Look, I mean, there's so many ways of thinking about this, right? One way is, a straight cognitive behavioral therapy way would say, you say, I'm a failure. Well, that's all or nothing thinking. All or nothing thinking is that's a cognitive distortion.
Oh, I do that.
Right? Like, and so CBT gives us these 10, 11, 12 cognitive distortions. All or nothing thinking, black and white thinking, mind reading, discounting the positive. These are sort of ways that our thinking falls into error, but we don't catch it and we live as if they're true. So when you say, I'm failing, you're like, no, Matt, you're not. Like the truth is, look at all the things you do, right? You put a really beautiful roof over your kid's head. You provide them educational opportunities. You take them to mass every Sunday. You pray with them at least a couple times a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not every night. It's not, but it's not never, right? When our mind gets into black and white thinking, you're either, and we could do this, right? I'm a good dad or I'm a bad dad.
Oh.
That's not it, man. That's not it. It's like, it's much more nuanced and complex than that. It's like, I'm mixed bag and I'm a lot more good than bad. I have a lot more like gifts and talents as a dad than failings. I have some failings, but we can do something called magnification as well, where I take one small dimension and I blow it up. I don't pray with my kids. Is prayer important? Absolutely, man. But are there other dimensions of your life with your kids that are also important? Like when your kid came in, did you give him a hug? When your kid came in and said, hey, Dad, I'm just, drew this cool painting. Did you say, wow, buddy, that's awesome? You're magnifying the prayer. So that's like one thought error. You're over magnifying one area. You're downplaying a bunch of other goods. Then you're thinking in black and white, good dad, bad dad, failure or success. And it's not that. It's not black and white. It's not. So cognitive behavioral therapy would say, learn to recognize the thought error, identify it, and come up with a new, more rational thought that fits the evidence, right?
I love that.
That's
because you're
way.
not saying say things that make you feel good.
No, you actually want something that fits the evidence. Be rational.
You're being irrational.
Exactly.
Start to be rational.
Right? And so like what you say is something like, look, actually there's a whole bunch of things I got right this week. I'm actually a pretty good dad. I haven't prayed with them. And when I've prayed angrily this week. But also my wife's sick and things are hard and I'm stressed out. And I'd like to try to pray with them, 3 or 4 times this next week, right? But it gives you a much more balanced view of yourself. You're not good or bad. You're not a success or failure. It's like, it's nuanced. And we get into really simplistic thinking, which causes all sorts of maybe, how would you say it? Feelings that aren't consistent with the evidence. So you're feeling shame, but it's not really, you shouldn't quite be feeling shame because you're not that bad, Matt.
Yeah.
So that's one way of thinking about it, right? Another way, maybe it's less sort of empathic, is just like stop thinking about yourself so much. Like, I'm a failure, me. Like, what if we just turned our thoughts and attention toward like service of God and service of others? And yeah, I'm going to mess up. But it's not like, how could Matt Fradd mess up? How can I not be praying with my kids? Like, I know how you could not be praying with your kids. You know how I can not. Pope Benedict, that guy sins. The Saint Therese, like she struggled with. We all.
Do you think sometimes it's helpful, or is this a strategy that's helpful to sometimes say, what would I say to my dear friend who came to me with this? Like if you came to me and went, I feel like I'm just screwing up, I didn't pray with my kids. I'd be like, dude, you're a great dad. Your kids are beautiful. 100%. Like,
especially if
I would say all those nice things that are true.
As long as they're true, right? It's not just about
feeling.
It's not about just feeling good, right? It's about what is the evidence and what is, from a cognitive behavioral perspective, what are the beliefs that fit that evidence? Where are my thoughts in error? Like, what are the thought errors that are here that are causing me to misperceive
That's really good.
what's happening? But then also, AA, the 12 steps of AA, just sort of say like excessive sort of self-flagellation and shame, and like, just stop thinking about yourself. Like, okay, you kind of messed up. Of course you're going to mess up. Turn your thoughts toward helping your children. Turn your thoughts toward God and how you can be of service. Because what happens is we fall into this, I'm so bad, I'm not good enough, I'm not. And then all of a sudden, this is the sweet spot for the devil, because now we're really not useful to God because we're thinking about what a failure we are and and we miss all these opportunities to love, serve, honor God and others because I'm so turned in upon myself thinking about what a failure I am. And then, by the way, you're going to compensate. You're going to say, okay, I'm so afraid of being a bad dad. So
we're going to pray 3 mysteries.
Exactly, dude. You go hard.
And then you burn yourself out immediately.
The kids are resentful. And now they're not you're finally like all amped up for it. And now they're not behaving the way they should.
And,
man, that's so we just perpetuate it, right?
Just to interject a thought from Peterson here, one of the best things I've heard him say, or the thing that helped me the most is, what's something you could do that you would do that would make your life better?
100%. 100%, right? And here, St. Jose Maria Escriva had this letter once. He was talking to priests. It wasn't a letter. It was a talk he was giving to seminarians and priests of Opus Dei how they should work with parents. And he basically said something like, look, pray the rosary every day, but like you don't force your children to pray it. You pray it with great love, devotion, and attentiveness with your spouse, and let them see it. Let them be around it. Let it be like a warm fire that draws them in. And so sometimes
cool.
it's really consoling to me, man.
Me too. I see that in the McNamara's, incidentally, because sometimes when I'm praying the rosary, it's like, we're going to get this right. Like, say it. Say the last. You're not praying.
I know.
You didn't make the sign of the cross. No, make the sign of the cross. Hold the beads. No, I know you have 10 fingers. Hold the freaking beads.
I know. And you're like, why don't my kids want to pray the rosary?
I know.
It's so
I'm
weird.
such a beautiful person to be around when we do it. But then I'm at the McNamara's across the street from us. And the kids get up and they go get a drink of water without asking permission. They come back. They get into laughing fits. And both the parents, God bless them, Rob and Caroline, are just... And I'm like, okay, this is it. This is exactly what Escrib was talking about.
Because when my fear creeps in and I go, if they don't start to take it seriously, if they don't pray the rosary right, they're never going to have the kind of
they're going to
relationship
be living
with God.
on the street, smoking crack, atheist.
Not exactly, right? And so it's like, we got to get this right now. And man, I just...
that's so consoling. I'm sure this chat that we're having right now is so consoling to everybody out there who now realizes that they're not alone and they're not that special.
And that pressure,
we're all like this.
And that pressure that we sort of put on ourselves and think, look, I think there are things we can be attentive, we can be deliberate, we should be trying. I should be trying, but sometimes we put such a rigid view and cap, and it should look like this, and the kids should never get up, and I just find that I think that oftentimes does more harm than good for our children's personalities, for their love of God. And look, sometimes I know families who have been very strict about this stuff. Very consistent, very strict, and they have children who on the surface look incredibly disciplined, incredibly well-behaved, but you realize interiorly there's no interior freedom. They're moved by fear. They're moved by fear of losing their parents' love and attention and affection. They're moved by fear of what if God is going to be really disappointed. And we want to honor God. We want to love God, but it's sort of like an unhealthy sort of servile fear but on the surface they look really right. And what I want is this interior freedom for my kids.
I know I want to speak about another family in town just to praise them.
Please.
The Welkers.
Yeah.
Here's one thing I've said this I think before on the podcast. Like, I know families who have exactly what you're saying. Like, we're praying and it looks really good and we're all very neat and polished, but it just feels like there's this defensiveness in the children, even against the world. That's perpetually, I don't know. There's some good to that maybe too, but I love the Welkers because, like, I don't think they'd mind me saying this, like, they're just a beautiful, messy family. Like, I walk into their house and said something, you have the same interior decorator as me, like there's stuff everywhere, but like, I see that the kids want to be with their parents. They're standing in the kitchen. They want to chat with them. The parents aren't continually nitpicking. It's beautiful. There's a freedom. That's what you're talking about, that interior freedom. It may not look polished and rigidly Catholic in the way that we think that's perfection, but there's a joy and a love there.
I think one of the best things we can give our kids is one, like when they see mom and dad loving each other, right? Honoring one another, loving one another, affection, care,
I reckon that's the best gift my dad ever gave me, is how he loved my mum. I would wake up at night hearing my mum belly laugh in the room next door because my dad probably told some dirty joke to her. Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's great.
Like they even when I was like an adult, they would flirt in ways that would make me uncomfortable. And but it wasn't inappropriate. But it would sort of you'd be like, oh, gross. But you're like, that's so beautiful. I'm
awesome.
really glad. What a gift.
Yeah, for them to see that, and then like you said, for our kids, the gift of, like, in an appropriate way, our friendship. The gift of drawing them in. Like, I think I don't view parenting as just sort of getting the job done, kicking them out. And like, I want my kids to participate in, I want us to have a family culture. I want them to talk with us in the kitchen. I want to, at night, hop up on the counter and I'm having a cup of tea and my 15-year-old's there, my daughter's there telling a story, and the 10-year, and my wife, and we're laughing and we're telling stories, and we're like, that relationship with us. That's not just one of, setting boundaries are important. Guardrails are important, right? I'm pointing them in a general direction, but my sole job isn't just to provide guardrails to my kids. It's to, like, love them. And it's to Anyway,
I love
rambling. Hey, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I have the bladder of about a 4-year-old.
Do you have a break video launched, Neil?
I can try one. Here we go.
We'll take.
back.
Ready? Okay. Listen, ready, say go. Welcome back to Pints with Aquinas, the very overproduced YouTube show. Before we go any further, I want to say a huge thanks to Hallow for supporting the show. Hallow started supporting the show back when they were very small. And then I blew them up. Not really. No. They are a fantastic app. It's a prayer and meditation app. I would highly recommend people check them out. hallow.com/MattFradd. Click the link in the description below. When you sign up there, you'll get 3 months for free. And you can decide after those 3 months if you want to continue or not. My wife and I use it. It's actually my Catholic lo-fi stuff is now on that app.
My mother-in-law uses it. She loves
Hallow?
it. Yeah. Sheila Hart. She loves it.
Well, to your point earlier about sort of reflecting upon how we reacted, this has so many things. You can pray the rosary on it and it'll lead you through the rosary. It'll lead you through. It has sleep stories by Dr. Scott Hahn and other people. But
Scott's reading sleep stories.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. I'm gonna play it right now. It's so weird when I saw
what kind
him.
of sleep story? Like
He reads the Bible to you. Like it was a little awkward when I saw him the other day. I'm like, you read me to sleep last night. But once you hear this, you will understand why. You ready?
Come on.
Let's see. Come on. Load.
Let's hear.
So anyway, here we go.
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's Bible story.
Stop.
My name is Dr. Scott Hahn.
Stop.
I'm the founder and president.
Listen to that guy read the phone book to you.
He's
Right?
fantastic.
I'm never, he lives a couple houses down. I'm never going to be able to look at him the same way.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward. It's like you and I had it's like having an inappropriate, intimate dream about somebody, then you see them. Hi, you read me
to sleep.
So anyway, hello.com/MattFradd, hello.com/MattFradd. One of the things we talked about, though, in regards to this was examination of conscious at the end of the night.
Dude, so
and
important.
it's not just about like, how did I screw up? It's like, when did I feel uncomfortable? When did I feel the need to perform? So that'll help you with that.
That's
so
awesome.
go check it out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good.
And the good thing, I think sometimes in a good examine, a good examine should be kind of short too, because you don't want to like wallow in self-pity and have what did I do well? What did I get right today? Is there anything that I got right?
Is it anything?
Yeah.
That's a nice.
Can anything good come out of?
If you go to the link, it's 3 free months also.
3 free months. Shut up. What are you waiting for? Do it now.
Yeah. They did. They were really generous with Franciscan faculty, and they gave us over Lent. They gave us an entire free subscription to Hallow.
Nice.
It's really beautiful.
Nice.
Really
All right,
beautiful.
so we got lots of questions.
Yeah.
We don't. I want to say an apology to everybody who's watching right now who sent in questions, because we're not going to get to them all.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying is so helpful. I don't want to cut you off.
No,
also, whenever you need to go, just let me know.
Yeah. I was gonna, by like 1 o'clock. So we have time. Yeah,
Okay,
we have time.
good.
We could do one more
Wow.
question.
All right. This person. Again, I'm not going to read the first names because for anonymity.
Right.
Do you, Dr. Breuninger, have any solid suggestions on finding a real Catholic therapist? Seems very difficult. In particular, one that is experienced with combat PTSD, seemingly even more rare. Even ones I've encountered that are Catholic, faith has taken a very back burner.
Yeah.
The standard therapies like CPD can be helpful, but understanding the role of faith in treatment and how spiritual desolation, spiritual attack can make things like CPD feel like more than just trying to clean a wound with muddy water.
Yeah. That's great. So, my training, a lot of my training in grad school was...
Sorry, real quick, what's CPD?
I think you mean CPT. I think you mean... So
CPT, yes.
CPT is
okay.
cognitive processing therapy. It's one of the sort of evidence-based treatments for PTSD. And the gist of CPT is something like similar to what we're sort of talking about before, is that what happens is when we experience a trauma, we have these 5 domains of life. And let me see if I can remember them. It's safety, power and control, trust, self-esteem, and intimacy. And what happens when we experience a trauma is we can alter our beliefs. A trauma can alter our beliefs dramatically in any one of these domains. And what we tend to do is what they call over-accommodate. Our belief becomes sort of exaggerated or excessive. So imagine safety. And this is a big one for combat vets. You're in Iraq or in Afghanistan. You generally go into war, you think, okay, I don't know, the world's a generally safe place. I get drafted from Steubenville, Ohio or whatever. I think, the world's a generally safe place. I go to Iraq or Afghanistan, my best friend gets killed, or a Humvee gets blown up and we lose a bunch of guys in our unit. And my beliefs go, the world isn't safe. You have to be on guard at all times or something bad will happen. And so in the domain of safety, I've over-accommodated. I've sort of overly generalized from this experience. Mm-hmm. And so when I come back home, the problem is I come back to Steubenville.
Fight or flight continually.
And I go, the world's unsafe. You have to be on guard at all times. And so what CPT tries to do is identify the ways that your trauma has altered your beliefs in these domains.
Wow.
And make them more rational to fit the evidence. So is the world unsafe? Sometimes it is. But it's even more nuanced than that. You should be more on guard at 2 a.m. alone in downtown Steubenville than you should be at noon, broad daylight in Beverly Hills, right? I mean, so what you try to do is sort of create nuance and flexibility in somebody's beliefs so that the way the trauma has sort of caused them to over-accommodate gets reduced. So CPT it's one of the common treatments for PTSD. And so I did training, I've used CPT a fair amount. I did a lot of training with vets in graduate school. My clinical internship was at the VA hospital in Houston. And so I did a trauma rotation, and we use CPT and exposure therapy. And but I had an idea. I wrote a paper, I actually published a paper, and this is interesting. On, we're going to come back to attachment, God attachment, and CPT, because I think that when you have a secure God attachment, you experience safety, you're more likely to trust, you have deeper sense of intimacy, well-being, and you have a greater sense of power and control. When I have a safe, secure, now, so what I think happens is when we experience a trauma, because these domains overlap, CPT is interested in those domains, God attachment's interested in those domains, they sort of overlap. I think when you experience a trauma, it can disrupt your God attachment. It can disrupt your sense of safety, which can disrupt your God attachment. I also think, though, that by focusing on one's attachment to God, you can create safety, which can actually help sort of potentially heal or make somebody feel more comfortable going through CPT. But look, I mean, what you're asking for, you're asking for a diamond in the rough there, right? So some people are very well trained in trauma treatments, but they don't have the faith dimension.
Wouldn't you prefer that? Like, I would imagine you would rather someone who's an expert in trauma treatment than someone who's a Catholic who doesn't have that.
I would. Personally, I would. Because I think the alternative is you have somebody who knows a lot about the faith, but they actually don't know evidence-based trauma treatments. And then they're just throwing mud at the wall.
Yeah.
And now here's maybe the best, here's a practical solid thing, right? Because you're probably not going to find that. I mean, maybe. But part of what that question is getting at is Catholics we're not super great at yet having thought through deep integration. I mean, the way the Protestants have. Protestants have been thinking about how Christianity and psychology can be integrated, and they have different models for it, but they've been thinking it through seriously and academically for 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Excitingly, and maybe your viewers should know this, I was recently on a task force with the Catholic Psychotherapy Association. So I'm actually flying out there tomorrow for their annual conference in Minnesota. But it was a task force to create an academic journal, a Catholic integrative journal. So the journal is called Integratus, which is a Latin word for wholeness. And it's the official journal of the Catholic Psychotherapy Association. And what we're going to do is we're going to invite academic articles and have Catholics begin to start to think about integration seriously. So that's the good news, right? And we need to be doing this. But what he's asking for, or she is asking for, is I suspect he, because combat PTSD,
he was a
right?
dude, yeah.
But here's one real practical solution I think you could do. Find a really good trauma therapist, right? Who knows CPT, who knows prolonged exposure, whichever you prefer, and then find a really good spiritual director.
Yeah.
And put them in dialogue. Let your counselor talk to your spiritual director, and find a counselor who's open to that, and let your spiritual director talk to your counselor, and have them pull in the same direction. So when you're working in CPT on beliefs around safety, can your spiritual director give you passages to meditate on or prayers to say that really focus on safety or trust? Maybe your spiritual director could have you say the litany of trust while you're working on the domain of trust, right? But if your spiritual director can appreciate what CPT is, they can collaborate with the therapist and give you meditations, give you practices, give you ideas that could help you. I think that's probably getting two separate people and asking them to pull in the same direction, because what I tend to see is somebody who's either a really good trauma therapist or a really good Catholic. Getting both is hard.
Yeah.
And then to figure out the integration question's tough with trauma. I mean, what would a good Catholic trauma therapist need to know? Would they need to know sort of this, like, where you are spiritually? Are you in the purgative way, the illuminative way, the unitive way? What dimension of your spiritual development is looking like, are you in a dark night that looks like some sort of reaction to trauma? I mean, what what they would potentially have to know in order to integrate it with trauma would be extensive.
So would you say
Very
here
few people
to
are
like
there.
to this fella not to let the great be the enemy of the good?
Yeah. Look, get good trauma therapy and get a good spiritual director. And if they can't work together, find two who can.
Yeah.
Find two who are willing to, and let them work collaboratively on your case.
This question is along with it.
Yeah.
Patron Chris Buston says, do you know of any organizational websites where I can just put in my zip code and find a reputable Catholic therapist who's local to me?
Yeah. I think it's called catholictherapist.com. I'm trying to remember who started it. I don't know if it was, maybe Nick could look it up. Was it, I don't know. It might have been Greg Popchak, or it might have been Greg Bottaro, or one of these guys.
Here's a question a lot of people have, and I think it kind of relates to our conversation earlier about attachments. This person says, any advice for dealing with scrupulosity? How much can be treated with therapy versus spiritual direction? First of all, just say a word about scrupulosity.
Yeah. So scrupulosity
and maybe how it differs from a tender conscience. Like a tender conscience is one thing, scrupulosity is not good.
100%. So I think scrupulosity is maybe best conceptualized or most commonly thought of as a subtype of OCD, right? So OCD, you have obsessions or intrusive thoughts that keep coming fast and with great intensity that are really distressing. So you have these obsessive, intrusive thoughts. And then you oftentimes have a compulsion, which is a behavior that's aimed at reducing the anxiety caused by the obsession. Scrupulosity is thought of as a subtype of OCD. So the obsessions are just of a religious nature, and your compulsions tend to be religious behaviors.
Oh my
right?
goodness, that's so helpful.
Yeah. And so oftentimes the same treatments that work for OCD work pretty well for scrupulosity. The big guy, if you want to look up some academic work on scrupulosity, his last name is Abramowitz. Is it John?
Good luck spelling that.
Yeah, I think it's Abramowitz. First name J. Jonathan Abramowitz, I think. Does a lot of work on scrupulosity academically.
Is he a Christian too? Or
Don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question.
Doesn't
I would
need to be.
suspect. I mean, they oftentimes say research is me search, and so
now with Google especially.
Yeah. So look. That being said, a lot of the same treatments that work for OCD work for scrupulosity. One of the most common treatments for OCD is what's called exposure with response prevention, which means you expose the person to the thing they're afraid of, and you prevent them from doing the compulsive behavior. So what happens is you have this intrusive thought, fight or flight, the alarm bells go off, and you say, danger, danger, danger. Engage in this behavior to reduce the danger. What you're basically asking the person to do is expose themselves to the thought or the experience, let the alarm bells go off, and let their brain learn that nothing's going to happen. You don't need to engage in this behavior because nothing's going to happen. And your brain, sort of in a crude way of thinking about it, sort of learns to shut the alarm off. Oh, hey, that thought isn't a problem. Don't feel anxious about it. Don't worry about it. Nothing happens. But what we tend to do is we think this is such a terrible thought. Maybe this was a sin. Maybe this disapproves. Maybe God disapproves of this. Maybe we pray in the rosary, or I didn't genuflect well enough, or I didn't bless myself evenly, or I mean, scrupulosity can just be so.
If there are any priests
horrifying.
watching, one piece of advice I would give to them, if I can humbly do that, would be if you're dealing with a penitent in the sacrament of confession who struggles with scrupulosity, have them do their penance in front of you. Because often what happens with those who are scrupulous is we fear that we didn't do the penance properly.
100% right.
So if someone just do it now, you're done.
And then be done.
Yeah.
And so so that's essentially, right, exposure with response prevention. You do it once. Now, do not go home and do it again. Do not do it again in the car. Do not do it. Just hold that anxiety. You might feel anxious. You might feel worried. Hold it. Sit with it. Hold it. See what happens. Is God going to smite you? Are you going to come down? Right? Are you going to? Is your heart going to explode? You're okay.
Yeah.
Right. Don't come back to confession for at least 2 weeks too, because sometimes scrupulous people can come back the next day or 2 days later. Well, I feel like maybe. So the question is tender conscience versus scrupulosity. Well, let me make one more caveat about that. That gets tricky for Catholics when exposure response prevention when you're talking about potentially sort of graphic, sexual, intrusive thoughts. You don't necessarily want somebody to be conjuring those up intentionally and exposing themselves to them. So there's different ways of addressing it. I think one way is you can sort of introduce people to beautiful art, show them sort of beautiful art where there's the Sistine Chapel and things like this. If they're worried about, like, I saw private parts, was that a sin or something like that? You can show them beautiful, tasteful art that obviously isn't pornographic, and just let them learn to feel comfortable seeing beautiful art. The other thing you could do is sort of take a mindfulness approach here. And I'm not talking about sort of like Eastern, you're doing yoga, let the demons in, right? I'm talking about just learning to pay attention to your thoughts, but not feel like you have to latch on to every thought. I mean, we have so many thoughts all the time, Matt. The problem is, and so many that we dismiss. I mean, the problem with the scrupulous person in some sense is they have a thought, maybe God isn't real. And they go, oh my God, what if he's not? Did I just have doubt? Do I lack faith? Now, the difference is I have that thought. I'm walking down the street. I go, what if God isn't real? And I go, oh, what a silly thought. That's weird. And I just let it go. That thought doesn't particularly have meaning to me. It's not particularly, I don't take it as a true, meaningful, or I don't know, true or meaningful thought. I have thoughts in my head all the time. Bizarre, random thoughts that just come and go.
In sexual ones too.
Yeah, this happens a lot. Yeah, they just come up, right? They don't have to, I don't have to like go, oh my gosh, what does that mean about me? What does that, right, and panic. I can just notice it and just, hey, let's see what the next thought is. The problem is when we either latch onto it, like, this must mean something about me. Oh my gosh, what does it mean? Or we try to push it away forcefully. Both of those approaches, becoming fused to it or trying to push it away,
have the
cause anxiety.
Opposite effect too.
And they can cause distress.
Yeah.
Right? What does it mean about me? Oh no, I might be a bad person. Pushing it away, it's the white polar bear thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like don't think of a white polar bear, that kind of thing.
So mindfulness can help with scrupulosity, particularly if it's of a sexual nature. Just learning that, to recognize that you have thoughts that pop in your head all the time that aren't meaningful and don't matter. And you can just let them pass by. You don't have to latch onto them. You don't have to, you can watch them the way you watch TV on a TV screen.
Yep. Fusing together two pieces of advice I've heard from Chris West and Jason Everett. I would say that the next time you have this, and you tell me what you think as a therapist, of an intrusive sexual thought, one thing you can do is use that as an opportunity for gratitude and intercession. So saying, God, I thank you for the beauty of this person. Maybe it's an image you've seen when you were younger from a pornographic film or something. I thank you for this person. I pray that you would bless them. I wonder where they are right now. How are they doing right now? Where do they live right now? Like, are they well? Bless them, lead them closer to you. So it's like I'm kind of like, pornography in a way does what death does. It separates spirit and soul, and this person becomes this outlet for me. But I can sort of like reinfuse body and soul by just like ask, like, where is this person? How is she doing? How is he doing? And like bless them. And like, I thank you for her beauty. I thank you for his beauty, or something like that. And so I'm acknowledging the good and offering prayer. Would that be an example of facing it and responding well, or no?
Well, so maybe two things on that. I think for the person who's not scrupulous, that works. Okay. That's nice. You're finding the good. You're finding a good in the situation. You're reframing it. What was once sort of an image of objectification and selfishness and self-seeking, lust, you're now saying, you're humanizing it, right? I wish this person well. I hope they're doing good. You're sort of reframing it. I think that's fine for somebody who, you might say, your average man in the street, your average woman in the street. The problem with scrupulosity is that for the scrupulous person, that response is going to become their new compulsive behavior.
Oh, interesting.
And so that's what's going to reduce their anxiety. So the thought pops in their head and they go, thank you, God. Thank you. Okay, there's a good one. But it's going to, then what they're going to do, part of sort of scrupulosity can be this dimension where you're constantly monitoring your thoughts to see if you're having the thought you shouldn't be having.
Oh, no.
Which, by the way, does what?
Make you mad?
It makes you mad, makes you anxious, but it also makes you more likely to have the thought. Am I having that thought I shouldn't be having? And wait, am I having it now? And
it would be funny if it wasn't so tragic, is what I mean. I mean, that's terrifying.
It's terrifying. And some of these thoughts, I mean, I've worked with patients who have violent, intrusive thoughts, and it is so distressing for them. But part of the reason it's distressing is because of this thought. Like, what does it mean if I'm the kind of person that has these thoughts?
Yeah.
And the answer is, it means nothing. It actually means nothing, because these are just thoughts your brain's throwing up at you, right? Like, these are just every thought you have doesn't have meaning, and it doesn't matter. We have to appreciate that.
Okay, say that again, because that also sounds like totally false.
Yeah, every
thought you have doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
What does that mean? Of course it matters.
Matters, or every thought doesn't matter.
Sorry. Not every thought you have matters.
There is no God. There is no meaning. Nihilism is the truth.
That took a dramatic turn. Yeah, halfway through, Not every thought you have matters or has meaning. Right. I walk down the street. This happens to me occasionally. I walk down the street, and I'll just think, like, what if I punch that guy in the face? That's what I do. Now, the thought like pops up.
Totally, man.
Right?
I remember being a 7-year-old kid, altar-serving, being like, what if I stood up right now and screamed the F word?
Exactly.
That stuff happens to me frequently.
All the time, right? But these are random thoughts. And the truth is, for, generally speaking, those thoughts come and they go. And I just let it go. And I don't think to myself, what does that mean about the kind of person I am? Am I a sociopath? Oh my gosh. Could I also kill somebody if I could punch somebody? The scrupulous person is going to cause such anxiety because they think this thought must matter. This thought must mean something.
I'll tell you what
me.
Doesn't help the scrupulous person. Yeah. Telling them their scrupulosity is offensive to God.
Yeah. You know what's really bothering God right now? The way you are. You're like, no. Right? Dude, so I would worry that approach, the Weston Everett. So I think it would work for your sort of non-scrupulous person. The person with clinical scrupulosity, right?
Okay. This is why people like me should be really reluctant to just dish out advice we think works across the board,
for sure,
right?
Yeah, for sure, right? I mean, that person is going to make, their new compulsion is going to be this interior prayer, right? And now they're going to say, okay, did I just have that thought? Did I have it now? I got to do that thing. And they're going to feel like a slave in their head. They're going to feel anxious. They're going to feel. And so for that person, I think allowing them to just learn to let thoughts pass. Yeah.
That's great. This is a question I think you could probably answer in a sentence or two, and then we'll get on to
probably
something
not.
else.
It's not my style, Matt.
We'll see. Katie says,
sorry to interrupt, but just points of clarification. And Jonathan S. Abramowitz, I think was the person.
Yes. Abramowitz. Excuse me.
And then the person who started CatholicTherapists.com is Allison Ricciardi.
Oh, Allison Ricciardi. Yeah, sure. Great.
Good for her.
She's great. Yeah, she was a member of CPA. Yeah. Might still be. Was for a long time, maybe even a founding member of Catholic Psychotherapy Association.
Katie asks, how can a person find healing and help in a location where there are limited resources? There are very few therapists and counselors in my area, and most of them are very busy, and none of them are Catholic.
Yeah. Telehealth is really helpful here. So if most counselors, therapists can see people within state lines. Now look, there are downsides to teletherapy. I think I really, really value the face-to-face. I really love the face-to-face. I think it can be really powerful, but there are some really good therapists out there who do great work via telehealth. And so look in your state first, whatever state you're in, see who does telehealth, and maybe you can find a good therapist or a good Catholic therapist via telehealth within your state. And is that a website, telehealth, or is that? That's a good question. I think Catholic therapists should, it should indicate, and if it doesn't, you'd have to go to the individual person's website. It should indicate whether they'll do telehealth or not. Yeah. Most therapists on their website will. That's probably becoming more and more prominent. So with COVID, it just exploded, right? And I think some people found they loved it. Yeah. And some people found they really loved it. And it can also give you access to people who you otherwise wouldn't have access to. Yeah. So you're in California, there's a great therapist, 4 hours up north. You can now see them via telehealth, so. Yeah, you can search, one of the options in CatholicTherapists.com is telephone/online video counseling. Nick, I need you in my life. This next question comes from attractive and intelligent patron Alex. He says, and this is a great question, it seems that the number of mental disorders, conditions, and diagnoses is so high and prevalent that the term disorder has lost its relevance. Yeah. So how can we as Catholics discern the difference between personality traits, types, or maybe a rough patch in life versus a diagnosable mental disorder? And to that point, it does feel like these things are just multiplying. Yeah. Where it's like we don't even know what a human being ought to be anymore. We just know what they shouldn't be. And we're pretty sure that everyone's got something they shouldn't be. Yeah. It just sort of...
messy, but also maybe we're telling people, is it the case that we're telling people they have disorders when they just don't?
Look, okay, a couple of things. One,
ADD would be an example, right? You often hear people say
yeah.
ADD doesn't exist.
Right.
It's just boys being boys.
Right.
I don't think that's true, actually.
I don't think it's true either. I think
I
ADHD
see
exists.
where they're coming from.
But you have, part of the problem is you have a lot of practitioners, therapists, counselors, psychologists who aren't practicing well, who are practicing outside of their competence, and who are misdiagnosing. I mean, so you have, and what happens is when you have somebody misdiagnose somebody, people on the outside, we look in and we say, well, that person obviously doesn't actually have ADHD or bipolar, or maybe it's all a big sham.
Yeah.
So look, ADHD is a real thing. Bipolar is a real thing, but they're being diagnosed at rates that potentially suggest that they're being overly diagnosed, right? People are being misdiagnosed. It's really easy for somebody to look at somebody who feels depressed, they have depression, and then all of a sudden they hop up and they say, well, yeah, I had depression, I felt really depressed, but then sometimes I get up and I clean and I sing and I'm feeling happy, and like, oh, you're bipolar. You're like, you're not bipolar. That's not bipolar. When you see somebody in a manic episode, it has a very distinct flavor, feel. I mean, it is clear. Now there's two types of bipolar. There's bipolar 1, bipolar 2, but still, you know it when you see it. To Alex's point, he's right. And we touched on this a little bit earlier. Diagnostic criteria can be difficult, and the lines between disorders are blurry. A lot of disorders share symptoms, which not only makes diagnosis difficult and tricky, it lends some question about how helpful are diagnostic categories when there's a number of shared symptoms.
Yeah.
Are we actually talking about maybe a deeper overarching category that we've sort of artificially separated into two things, right? I mean, so there's some deep philosophical questions, I think, in the approach the DSM takes. The number of disorders has fluctuated between versions, between DSM-1, DSM-2, DSM-3, which came out in the 80s, and now DSM-5. The number of disorders has changed, sometimes more, sometimes less, right? And so it just points to the fact that this stuff is tough. I don't think there's a super clear answer. I think a good therapist, here's what I'll say, a good therapist recognizes when something is sort of culturally, developmentally, socially appropriate. Like you feel really sad after the death of a grandparent. What is healthy grief versus depression? I tend to be very hesitant to diagnose unless I've done lots of testing and assessment. They've validated, reliable, sort of psychometrically rigorous tests that you can give people. So I want to do a good clinical interview. I want to get actual measures. I want to get outside information from peers and colleagues. And I want to use multiple sources of information, qualitative and quantitative, before I make a diagnosis. I'm much more likely to diagnose somebody with something like an adjustment disorder, which is basically like, hey, something's happened in your life and you're just kind of having a hard time getting on your feet. That to me is like pretty normal and normative. Like we have hard times adjusting. And that's, I think sometimes we pathologize, to Alex's point, we pathologize what is normal. And we need to be really mindful of that. We need to be really, really mindful of not pathologizing normal human reactions.
And yet at the same time,
Or
we don't
sin,
want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
We don't want to be like, well, therapy's just a crock.
Right.
It's just sin and virtue.
Right.
That's it.
And that's clear. Yeah. And hopefully for some folks, that's clearly not the case.
Yeah.
When you've seen somebody incredibly depressed, when you've seen bipolar, when you've seen panic disorder, when you've seen ADHD, like radically, and then when you've seen a young boy who has ADHD get on a little bit of medication and thrive. I mean, utterly thrive. But there's not a lot of money in nuance. There's not a lot of money in being careful. The temptation for psychiatrists to prescribe is really high. So So you come in, you get a 30-minute session, then you meet with them after that for 15 minutes and they just check on, they need to give you a diagnosis that allows them to prescribe a medication. It tends, psychiatrists, they vary obviously, but sometimes it's really
But
quick.
I like what you say there. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, as it were. Like if I prescribe something and I find that I'm actually excelling, it's like, okay.
Right.
Well, to that point, if somebody comes to you and they think they're depressed, there's like this dark cloud hanging over their head perpetually, at what point do you say to yourself, I need to send them to a psychiatrist to get medication?
Yeah. So for me, that consideration.
And what is antidepressant medication like? How effective is it? How reliable is it?
That's a great question. Okay. So for me, generally, I'll recommend medication when somebody has sort of high, moderate to severe disruptions or disturbances in their ability to function. And so if this person is really having a hard time getting out of bed, when they can't function at work, when they can't, sometimes medication can take the edge off enough that the person can sort of reestablish and gain some traction at work, at home, with sleep, in therapy. So I'll recommend medication when, moderate to severe disruptions in these areas of their life. And look, traditionally medications weren't intended to be this like forever thing. And some of the research is fascinating on this, right? Psychotherapy, good evidence-based psychotherapy is as effective as medication. And study after study show that medication and good psychotherapy are equally effective in treating most disorders. Now, the caveats there are like the psychotic disorders, schizophrenia or bipolar, but anxiety, depression, panic attacks, right? This sort of thing. Equally effective. One of the benefits of therapy, maybe over medication, is that it has a lower relapse rate. So once somebody comes off a medication, they're significantly more likely to have a relapse with the disorder than if they received psychotherapy.
So would you say a healthy analogy would be like a physiotherapist giving you crutches while they actually work to heal you?
So so very often the best is sort of.
I said physiotherapist. Do you say physiotherapist in America?
No.
Physical
therapist.
Yeah, we call them physios.
Physio.
Continue though. I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. So I think that oftentimes the two together are the best, right? They're on medication. It's taking the edge off. It's maybe helping mood a little bit. They're able to engage in therapy with greater enthusiasm, with more attentiveness. They're less tired. They have more focus and more. And then you can have a psychiatrist help them wean off the medication as therapy begins to terminate. I think that's really oftentimes. Yeah. But again, you want to have a good, attentive psychiatrist. You want to have it's really important.
Do you know, because this isn't your area of specialty, I don't think, but how does antidepressant medication work?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of antidepressant medication, right? And I'm certainly no expert. I'm not a psychiatrist, but different medications, depending on what class they are, work differently. The most common ones now are called SSRIs, so they're selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So the idea is you've got these synapses in the brain, right? Or you've got these neurons, brain cells, and there's synapses between them, the space between them. And the one brain cell releases serotonin into the synapse, and there's binding sites on the other synapse. And if enough serotonin binds to the binding sites, the next neuron fires, right? What they found, I have a video on this actually, the chemical imbalance hypothesis. What they found among depressed patients was that they had lower levels of serotonin metabolites. So a metabolite is a byproduct of a neurotransmitter. And one way to measure how much of a neurotransmitter you have in your brain is to measure how much of the byproduct you have in your cerebrospinal fluid. So they found that depressed patients had less serotonin metabolites in their cerebrospinal fluid than non-depressed patients.
That's fascinating.
Fascinating. So they said, well, it must be, just they don't have enough serotonin. So if we can boost their serotonin, we can get rid of their depression. And so one way to boost serotonin is when this neuron releases serotonin into the synapse, part of what happens is the serotonin gets taken back up by the neuron that released it. It has a mechanism to take all of the neurotransmitter in the synapse, in the space, and bring it back into the cell so it can be used again. What SSRIs do is they block the mechanism to reuptake the serotonin. So the cell that releases serotonin, the mechanism to take it back up is blocked, which means that more serotonin stays in the synapse, which means there's a greater chance of it binding. Right? It's in a higher concentration, so it has more chance of binding to the binding sites and firing the subsequent cell. So that's how SSRIs work. They block the reuptake of serotonin, so you have more neurotransmitter in the brain or in the synapse, which means you're more likely to have these particular types of neurons fire. What we find is that after about 6 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, the person's mood oftentimes changes. Now, what's fascinating about that is if you give somebody an SSRI, their serotonin boosts almost immediately. I mean, it works pretty quickly. So what does that tell us? Why does it take 4 to 6 weeks for mood to change? Well, it seems like actually it's not just a simple mechanism like we need to boost serotonin in the brain. If that was it, you'd feel better immediately. It seems like there's something like a downstream effect, meaning by boosting serotonin, something else is happening, something, which is why you have this lag effect.
Interesting.
For mood to increase. So the truth is, this field is in its infancy. I mean, we know more about the brain than we did, but this field is like in its infancy because we actually don't understand the mechanism for how these medications work.
Is that a good reason to just hold off because this medication could be very dangerous?
So they tend not to be very dangerous. I mean, what we have now is we have decades of research on people who have been on these. And let me give the caveat there. Taken appropriately, prescribed by a good psychiatrist, they tend not to be super dangerous. Now, there's something called the black box warning on some of these medications. And what has been found is that some of these medications can actually increase suicidal ideation and suicidal thoughts.
What does ideation mean?
Just ideas, thoughts, fancy word for thoughts. It can increase suicidal thoughts for teens. And so if you put a teen on some of these medications, you have to watch more carefully, because even though you're putting it on them to help reduce their depression, it can actually increase their suicidal thoughts.
That sucks.
And so and so again, you want an attentive psychiatrist. You want a psychiatrist that takes a holistic approach.
Yep.
I want a psychiatrist who looks at my nutrition. Here's something fascinating. I mean, time and time again, moderate cardio exercise has been shown to change mood.
That's been my experience.
I mean, so I want a psychiatrist who's asking like, hey, are you getting some exercise?
Yep.
Like 3 or 4 times a week, are you getting like moderate cardio exercise, 30 minutes of moderate cardio exercise? How are you eating? How are you sleeping? So I think medication is fine and it's sometimes warranted. We should be careful to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say it's all bad, you should never take it. And we should be careful to just assume that it's sort of this golden
that's really helpful
placebo. We want good psychiatrists who are working with psychologists to treat holistically. I
took ADD medication a couple of years ago. What are some of the names?
Experience?
I'll tell you.
Ritalin, Adderall. And then there's like
It was one of those.
There's off-brand names. Yeah.
My experience was it was like I had 5 cups of coffee.
Oh, really?
And so I was standing in front of people at church looking at them like this. I was just like super aware in a way that I didn't like being super aware, so I stopped it.
Interesting.
That was my experience.
Let me ask you a question. Were you more more productive? Did your thoughts feel like they slowed down? Did you feel more productive? Did you feel like you were okay?
But but what's interesting is I feel that way with coffee.
100%.
So when I drink a ton of coffee, I'm way more focused.
Dude, so one thing you can do, folks who have ADHD, I mean, one thing you can do, a sort of quick and dirty shortcut is caffeine, like drinking coffee. Look, it's a similar mechanism. So the way ADHD medications work is, one way to conceptualize it is you've got the centers of the brain that are sort of about attention, focus, planning, and that's up here. That's the prefrontal cortex. And then you got sort of like the parts of the brain that are desire, things you want, like, and that part of the brain is flying in people with ADHD, right? Buzzing. the part of the brain that does planning, control, attention, focus is moving at a snail's pace. So this part of the brain is like, hey, look at that, look at this, look at this, look at this. You want that, look at this, look at that. And the part of the brain that should be sort of order, organizing, planning, paying attention.
I'm offended that you would know so much about me and say it publicly in front of me on live.
But here's what ADHD medication, what it does is it speeds up the prefrontal cortex. I mean, it's a stimulant, right? It's a stimulant.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's interesting that I said it felt like I was on coffee.
Oh, yeah. It's a stimulant that speeds up the prefrontal cortex so it can keep up with all the information that this part of the brain is sort of throwing at it and handle. It's working now at the same speed, so it can handle it. It can plan, organize, attend, filter out, right?
That's funny. Yeah. I once said, and this is funny, I think, you told me, I was in Manhattan for the first time and someone said, well, what did you think? And I said, it was good to finally find a city that could keep up with me.
It moves at my pace. Yeah.
But I find myself, and you tell me if this has anything to do with ADHD, when I go into a mall, they don't exist anymore, but when they did, and I'd go into a mall.
A mall.
A shopping mall.
A mall.
And if I go into a shopping mall and there's tons of stores and I exhaust very quickly.
For sure.
That amount of visual stimuli crushes me.
Matt, for sure.
Somebody once said of me, it was this Filipino woman after I was there a week, she said the most true thing anybody's ever said about me. She said on the way back to the airport, Matthew, you are like a phone with many apps. I'm like, what?
Thanks,
and she said,
I think.
Very exciting but dies quickly. Isn't that brilliant? I told my wife, she's like, 100%. Speaking of 100%. That kind of exhaustion when you go into a place with a lot of visual stimuli isn't something I see other people experiencing. No. Is that a kind of ADD sort of thing?
For sure.
It is. I don't know.
So right, like this
is why I hate cell phones. I hate iPhones.
I know.
I open up the iPhone, I get exhausted immediately because there's so many options. It crushes
Facebook, me. I mean, certain particular apps will be totally overwhelming because the way they're structured just causes, right? I mean, it just grabs your attention and your attention, your focus, it just drains you.
So why is that then? Like, why is walking to a shopping mall? Am I right? Does that exhaust you, Neil? Neil, if you could bite me and give me your temperament, I would allow it. Neil's like phlegmatic and chill and cool and calm.
Here's the thing though, because when you were talking about coffee, I drink a lot of coffee every day, and I never heard that before about that being like a kind of self-diagnosis because I kind of have. I don't know. I feel like I'm not great at productivity because my mind just doesn't focus very well. So in that way, I kind of like.
But so here's important, right? This is important, Nick. Not all inability. Neil, sorry, I called you Nick twice.
That's why I corrected you the second time.
Yeah, we're gonna edit that out.
I'll let that slide. But I didn't want.
We're gonna put Morgan Friedman's voice over this, saying Neil. My best friend's name is Neil. I should remember that, Neil. So. Right, not all inattention, not all inability to focus is ADHD, right? And that's important that sometimes, right, we just don't actually, attention is analogous to a muscle. And so if you're just scrolling Facebook all day or reading these 2-minute stories or headlines or your attentional capacity will be significantly lower than, say, Mikhail Waldstein, who just sits and reads, right, these huge, dense texts.
In German.
Right, in German. Right, exactly, right? You actually can grow your attentional capacity. And so some of us feel easily distracted or distractible, inability to focus, just because we don't practice it. We actually practice the opposite. We practice distractibility. And so we have some capacity to grow our attentional control. So some people say, well, I must have ADHD because I can't pay attention, right?
Get off TikTok and then talk.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Like try to actually attend to things for long periods. Stop, look at something, take something in, pay attention to it. Like use your attention, read a book and read for, start off with 25 minutes and then move to 35 minutes and then move to 40 minutes and then move to an hour. Like you can grow your attentional capacity. The difference is folks with ADHD will find a hard time doing that. They oftentimes will fatigue quickly with so many options, right? Because the center of your brain that's seeing cool stuff, that's registering reward and cool stuff is flying. Look at that sword. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Right? See, I mean,
it's funny. Like, and this is when I think that maybe some of these diagnoses aren't just a bunch of baloney. Yeah. When I say that to you, like that's what I've never said that to anybody. Like I walk into a mall, I get exhausted quickly. Is that your experience?
That's what I was thinking of.
Because I'm trying to figure out if that's
for me. I think I get very like energized when I'm around a lot of things. But then if I like am there for more than like, because I'll want to stay there and like, you know, and stay on apps and things and find things to do and create and whatever. But then I feel at the end of the day, I'm like very low, very tired, very like, you know, down.
Yeah, zapped and
you're going to
down.
get, I mean, all of us, we're all going to fatigue with,
I see.
At some point, we're all going to flag or fatigue with.
But mine is like a quick dive. It's a nose dive. So,
I mean,
so tell me why that is.
I mean, like imagine, like the part of your brain that's saying like, hey, look at that cool thing. Look at that light. Look at that shirt. Look at that. I mean, it is just flying and it has nothing to filter it. So by the way, the prefrontal cortex also controls inhibition, putting the brakes on something. So the prefrontal cortex is moving at a snail's pace and it's not filtering out any of the stimuli. So part of I mean, I could walk in a busy mall, but part of what my prefrontal cortex is doing is also filtering out like,
yes,
not interesting. No, don't look at that. I'm not looking at every face. I'm not looking at every bag. I'm not. And some people with ADHD, right? And again, there's great heterogeneity, even like difference in even among people with ADHD, different experiences. So that's important to keep in mind. But it wouldn't be uncommon for people with ADHD to just be with so many things to look at, touch, but the shoes, the bag, the hand, and your brain just goes like, oh God, too much to look at. If you drink a cup of coffee, I'd be really curious what happens if you drank 2 cups of coffee.
Let's do it right now.
Like, Stupidville has not, we're getting a mall back, I think. I think our mall closed.
We're getting it back?
I think so.
I thought the St. Paul Center bought it.
Did they?
That's what I would be surprised.
That would be awesome.
Francesca just keeps buying up everything. But okay, drink 5 cups of coffee and then what?
Maybe 2. Start with 2. And then,
well, this is a
and
thought.
Then try it, right?
And then go into a mall.
And then go to a mall and see if you actually get tired less quickly. And see if you actually, your brain sort of, with the prefrontal cortex now being stimulated by the caffeine, if it sort of keeps up and filters out unnecessary, you don't look at as much. Yeah. Not everything grabs your attention. Not everything demands your attention. Not everything.
Interesting.
And so I wonder if you'd actually feel less tired.
Interesting.
But this is a great, coffee is, for folks who don't want to go on medication, sometimes a couple cups of coffee gives you the attention or focus you need to perform a task.
Gee, that's really... That's really fascinating.
Is there a kind of disorder where it's the opposite, where the other kind of cortex is overstimulated?
So let me think. Oh, yeah, well, sort of prefrontal cortex stimulation. Let me think about this.
Is there something where the medicine can just be lots of whiskey?
Yes, there's plenty of conditions that, I mean, your man Aquinas, right, says that like, treating melancholia, a bath and a glass of wine, isn't that?
Okay, I don't mean to correct you publicly, but because I'll get excoriated if I don't. He never says the glass of wine thing.
He never says wine.
That's just an apocryphal thing that gets thrown out.
He
says the bath
thing,
though.
alcoholic just said.
Although he does so, one of the first remedy for sorrow is pleasure, legitimate pleasure. So that could be incorporated. Maybe. Self-care would be the 5th point.
That'd be a stretch to say wine is there under pleasure.
But that's interesting. So you're talking about these 2 parts of the brain.
So the prefrontal cortex, I think one way schizophrenia works is you have an excess of dopamine in the prefrontal cortex. So, this part of the brain gets flooded with dopamine. I don't know my neurobiology, it's been a while, limbic system, or like midbrain structures and schizophrenia. I don't know. I don't know. But certainly...
but I didn't like it. I didn't like the feeling.
Well, so a couple things.
It felt like I had like 10 cups of coffee and then I was standing. Here's another thing that's given me a lot more energy and a lot more focus is fasting. So I don't eat till after lunch every day.
You do the intermittent
and
fasting,
I feel I have so much more energy and I'm so much more clear right now talking to you.
So look,
if I had a big meal, I'd be kind of sleepy.
For sure. I think that we're learning so much more about like nutrition and foods, types of fats, and how they affect mood, there's certainly some link. People go crazy with it, I think, but there's certainly some link between like gut health and mental health. The types of foods we eat, the types of fats, the types of carbs, whether we're, and again, I think we're sort of scratching the surface with how we understand these. And there's a ton of fad diets and a ton of fat, but there's certainly something there.
Yeah.
There's certainly something there. So again, approaching this from a holistic perspective where diet, exercise, nutrition, what times you eat, when you eat. The other thing look, some of these, it can be important sometimes to play with medications. What I mean by that is to have a psychiatrist who's willing to try different medications depending on your feelings. So if you're feeling that way, my guess is, first of all, you might be on a way too high of a dose. I mean, sometimes all you need is a whisper of these medications, and so was the dosage right? I mean, if you're like strung out on, it's like not probably too high.
This is amazing.
So, and then the other thing would be like different classes have different effects. And so some people respond better to like the Adderall family or the Ritalin family. And so playing with the dose and the particular family to find the sweet spot can be important.
Okay.
But again,
talk to your healthcare professional.
A psychiatrist.
That's helpful. Different kind of question here. This comes from our local supporter, Catherine.
Yeah.
She says, I am struggling to reconcile the commandment, honor thy father and mother, with a relationship that has been permeated with gaslighting. Explain what that is for folks in a second. And spiritual blackmail by a sibling and parent. Every spiritual book teaching points back to charity, not closing yourself off, staying in community, etc. The exact thing that have filled me with anxiety. How can I protect myself emotionally without it opposing my faith through self-reliance or rejecting my cross? What a wonderful question.
That's a great question. And look, this stuff is tough. It's nuanced. But here's what I would say. A couple of things. One is, I'm not sure honor your father and mother means that you always have to be in relationship with them. I mean, here's one way of maybe conceiving of it is that the best way to honor, and she mentioned charity in there, to be charitable, keep the relationship. Sometimes you'll hear this phrase used sometimes, detach with love. I've worked with parents of heroin addicts. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to close the door and say, look, when you're here, we've asked you not to shoot up in the house. We've asked you, when you are in the house, you steal. You've stolen your father's car. You've stolen my purse. You've stolen our credit cards. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to remove the opportunity for the person to fall deeper into harm or sin, and so you close the door.
Jesse Pinkman on Breaking Bad. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but he was a crack addict, and his parents kind of were just struggling with that.
Yeah. No. Look, it sounds so easy, right? As a parent, I mean, what a tremendous cross to have to. And I've done a fair amount of work with substance abusers, and what a tremendous cross to have to do that with one of your children.
Yeah.
But sometimes we have to close the door because you being here isn't good for you. Like, I love you enough to close the door because when you're here, you steal, you engage in behaviors that are hurtful and harmful to you.
And your siblings, maybe?
You're 100%. And so sometimes the loving thing, the truly wanting somebody else's good, can be to close the door. I think a similar thing can be said about honoring our parents. I think one way to honor our parents is to not put them in a position to hurt or harm us, because it's sort of trying in charity to prevent them from falling deeper into sin or not living up to the demands of their vocation, the demands of their role. So now how we do that, look, you don't have to like smash your dad's car window in with a brick, flip him the finger and scream as you walk away. You can say, I think honoring your father and mother can be how you draw that boundary. It can be how you close the door. So it can be saying, look, Dad, given the way things have been, I'm not going to come home for Christmas, or it's not good for me to actually spend lots of time there. But you say it, you honor them in the tone you say it in.
I see, yeah.
Don't confuse drawing a boundary or closing a door with not honoring somebody. I can honor them in the behavior of closing a door, especially depending on how I close the door.
Yeah. Do I slam it?
Yeah. Look, we're not called to be doormats. We're not called to be abused. We're not called to be, if you're, I think you asked about gaslighting. Gaslighting, I think the term comes from an old movie like in the 40s, right?
Where the husband was trying to get his wife to commit suicide, I believe, and would keep adjusting the gas lamp and then be like, no, this is you. This is you.
Yeah. It's somebody
such a great
makes you
analogy.
Feel, it really is, right? Somebody makes you feel crazy. And when you have a legitimate concern, a difficulty, right, and or observation, you bring it up, you note it, and they say, no, that's not how it is. That's not what I said. That's not what they always put it back on you like you're the crazy one.
This is like our political conversation between conservatives and liberals,
right?
right?
You can't have
leftists.
100%. You can't have it. I mean, it's just, that's a great point, actually.
Yeah, we live in a country with divorced parents who hate each other and keep gaslighting each other, and we're the kids who are like, "Can we get a different country
100%.
parent? No, we can't.
100%.
We're stuck here.
Great,
All right, let's do this."
Great.
Dr. Matthew, could you lower your mic a little bit? It's in the way of the camera.
Yeah,
you want to see that beautiful face.
That.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right.
Did you want to?
No,
sing?
I mean, I just wouldn't get. Don't become afraid that by closing a door or by drawing a boundary, that you're not loving your parents.
That's really helpful.
Really important.
It sounds like she was getting kind of the opposite sort of advice.
And people will tell you, oh, you're not being loving. No, you absolutely, we need to cut people out of our life sometimes who are toxic. It doesn't mean I don't pray for them. I can love people if I really believe in intercessory prayer and I can pray for somebody, I can fast for somebody.
Yeah.
I can make great acts of spiritual love without having to be in the firing line of toxic.
Toxic's another one of these words that came up.
All the time.
I almost made a joke,
all the time.
like cutting out people who are toxic. Like that barista who was dismissive of me and didn't recognize that I run pints with Aquinas, damn it. Right, I'm just joking. It's like, how do you know that they're being toxic and you're not just reacting out of your own woundedness?
Right, and look,
that's the question.
That's difficult. And I think some people are really quick to always point the finger at somebody else being toxic.
Yeah.
And this is where,
if that's what you're doing, I know. Maybe it's you.
At some point you have to say, right? Like I look out and I say, how many people in my life do I think are hurting, harming her? And when I'm pointing the finger all the time, so-and-so's my problem, so-and-so's my problem. So it's like, probably not. Probably not.
Yeah,
and we all know people that are sort of always pointing the finger.
And I mean, again, this is a subjective experience, but you can tell the difference between someone. Yeah. So what would we mean by toxic? There's all sorts of ways somebody could be toxic, that we could be toxic, but just kind of give us a short.
The way I'm thinking about it, at least with this question, is when she said somebody who's gaslighting, somebody who's engaging in behaviors that are legitimately emotionally or spiritually harmful to you. Or potentially physically harmful to you, that's always putting you in a position of maybe having to be the one that takes responsibility for the situation as well, rather than acknowledging their own actions. So, I'm using toxic generically as a sort of catch-all for emotionally, spiritually, or physically abusive behaviors. Again, we need to have some self-knowledge there, because not everything that feels bad to me is toxic. When my wife says, Matt, you were kind of mean to the kids. And I'm like, how dare you make me? What a toxic, no, that's me, right?
What is the DSM-6 going to say about toxic masculinity?
Can I be honest?
DSM-6, I'm joking.
They're coming out with a TR, a revised edition soon. And I wonder if we'll have.
Oh, dear God. All right. My question, says Lucy, do you have an idea why more Catholics don't choose to become therapists? Or is that even the case? It is so hard to find one, and also hard to explain to a secular one just how important the teachings of the church in one's life are, and thus the problems arise in this relationship. Let me just kind of offer something before you respond, because I sometimes work with people who are struggling to overcome a pornography compulsion or addiction. And I've said to them, in my estimation, it's better to find a certified sex addiction therapist who isn't Catholic than a really good Catholic who's a therapist.
I think that's right.
But I would say to them, have your initial meeting involve you explaining, look, I'm not okay with sex with self, contracepted sex, fornication. Can you work with me?
I think, look, are there pitfalls and trappings that we need to be mindful of as Catholics working with secular therapists? Yes. Do some secular therapists have an agenda to push? Yes. Will some secular therapists push practices and ideas that are contrary to the faith? Yes. Are there also a number of secular therapists that, if you explain to them the teachings of the church and your faith perspective, would be happy to work within that framework? Yes. And so I tend to side with you in saying something like, go to a really good therapist and ask them, will this be a problem? I mean, here are the criteria that my faith lay out for me when it comes to addressing this issue. Can you work with that? And if not, hey, thanks.
No problem.
And I'm gonna go to find someone else.
Yeah.
because the alternative is you have a bunch of well-meaning Catholics who understand sort of theology or church teaching well, but they can end up actually recommending things that create subsequent sort of harm. And so, yeah, but why are so few Catholics? So I agree with you. That's actually how I tend to think about it. Be open with the therapist about what you need, what your expectations are, and what your faith perspective is. And if they're willing to work with it, great. If they're not, just move on to the next one. But I don't know. I mean, that's tricky. I think there are a decent number. The Catholic Psychotherapy Association, again, has a fair number of Catholic therapists, Catholic counselors. It's like anything a little bit. One, in order to get the degree, you have to have at least to be a counselor, you have to have a master's degree. That's hard. It's expensive. And so those are like prohibiting factors, you know, money, time, intelligence. And then, you know, again, if you want to get a doctoral degree, some of the same barriers there, money, time, intelligence. The other is, I think there's a lot of fear around the field. Can I truly be a Catholic and be in this field? I know this field teaches things that are contrary to the faith sometimes. And I went to a great program. I mean, Baylor is a top-notch doctoral program in clinical psychology. But, you know, I had members in my cohort that we certainly disagreed theologically and politically. And I had one cohort member who we were talking about transgender, gender dysphoria and giving cross-sex hormones to children. And it was a sort of seminar style class. And I simply raised the point that because we don't exactly know sort of the mechanisms of how these things work and how they interact with puberty, it would seem to me that you'd want to be very cautious giving cross-sex hormones to children prior to puberty. And maybe that should not be.
What a banal statement.
I mean, it was just like, I was just trying to like raise a gentle flag.
Thought.
Yeah, right? This individual sat next to me in the next class. She had a mechanical pencil, which is like a strange thing to have in a doctoral program, you know, to be like an adult. And she took a fist, she made a fist, and she scratched on her paper. You know the sound, those, I hate bigots. And there's 6 of us in the class. I mean, it's a very small cohort model, and she's scratching this into her paper. She did not talk to me for 2 years.
Bless her.
So, and look, so that's part of it is we're aware that some programs, and Baylor is an interesting program.
Bless her.
Yeah.
Like my first reaction is to make fun of her and tell her she needs to go see a therapist, clearly. But the second thing is this clearly comes from some deep wound. Bless her. Bless her.
You know, and she sort of said to me that, you know, my beliefs and my faith, the Catholic Church's beliefs cause people to kill themselves and commit suicide. And there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's one. I mean, we know that this field can be fraught with sort of theological and philosophical pitfalls. And so I think some Catholics are afraid, what program would I go to? Would the program be? Now, Baylor is decent for me because even though it's a huge Baptist school, because it's a big Protestant university, they have to walk a very fine line and they can't so they're trying to be a genuine doctoral psychology program, but they're walking this sort of tension between we're also embedded in a deeply Baptist Protestant university.
Christian,
so I was able to be, I felt a little more safety, I think, asking some questions. And
I mean, you work at the university, obviously, but does Franciscan have a good, what do you teach? Like,
I teach, right now I teach intro to counselling.
Teach. So people wanted to be a counsellor or a therapist. Is Franciscan a good place to start for your undergrad?
Of course. One, you're going to get, what I think is really neat is sort of access to really great psychologists and clinical training, but you're also going to have access to guys like Scott Hahn, John Bergsma, Jacob Wood in theology, and guys in philosophy like, you know, Logan Gage and Brandon Dahm, Alex Plato, Rob McNamara, folks who are thinking about the nature of the human person, you know, scripture, tradition, healing in the Bible, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, the virtues. So now you have an opportunity to start to bring all of these things together and try to create an integrated vision of how does virtue work theologically? How does it work philosophically? Is there space in psychology for it? It's a really neat, I think Franciscan's a really neat place to begin to think through some of these clinical issues that dovetail with philosophical and theological ideas. And look, you're going to be able to practice your faith. And I will say, and then I'll be quiet, a big part of being a therapist is not just knowledge of modalities and theories, and it's how you are, it's who you are, it's how you sit with somebody. I mean, you could be incredibly knowledgeable, and if I sort of present it robotically and I can't connect with you, and I'm filled with all my own, insecurities and anxieties, and I don't feel my own sense of self, and I don't have a deep sense of identity, and I'm going to sit with you in a way that won't be particularly helpful. You might not hear the message. You might not hear what I'm teaching you. You might not feel comfortable sharing things with me. Franciscan has a community that's interested in growing in holiness and integration and personal, emotional, and spiritual health. And so you're being shaped as a person too. And I think that's really important for therapists.
Here's an interesting question from Dan. He says, what effects on mental health have you seen from suppressing artistic expression and creativity? What precautions should people take when they get back into it? Thank you, Dr. B. God bless. This is a student, I know.
Dan.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Interesting question.
Yeah, it's an interesting, that's right. I'm not going to get out over my skis. I don't know. I'll say this. I don't think I've ever seen that. I don't think I've seen sort of mental health problems arising from suppressing artistic or creative expression. What I have seen is expressing artistic and creative expression. I've seen it be a tremendous aid, right? People that are artistic and creative and who love that sort of thing, when you can reignite that passion or give them, you can give them homework as part of therapy. Like, hey, I want you to spend time today and draw. I want you to spend time doing something you love. And when the person says, hey, Dr. B, I spent 30 minutes and I got back, I got out my old pencils or my paints and I just drew and I felt alive a little bit. I've seen it work that way, but I've never experienced what happens if you suppress it. Does it cause some sort of, I imagine it works the same way as if you suppress anything that you love.
Well, that comes naturally.
Yeah. Any gift or talent you have. My guess is you're left feeling sad.
Do you take into account people's temperaments? Because
always.
Yeah,
always.
Like a healthy human being isn't going to look the same as another one necessarily.
100%. You're taking in so much information when you're trying to work with a client, a patient or a client. You're taking in biological information, right? So what are some genetic predisposing factors? Did mom and dad have depression? Temperament tends to be something we think of as being biologically driven, whereas personality we tend to think of being more sort of social or environmentally driven, but temperament sort of has a pretty high genetic loading. So you're looking at biological factors, you're looking at temperament, you're looking at personality, you're looking at role they play in the family, you're looking at stressors, you're looking at income level, you're taking all of these things into account when you're trying to understand a problem. What were triggers? What were things that immediately preceded the problem? Why would those things have been triggers? Are there sort of things that happened maybe in childhood that would make that particular thing a trigger? You're trying to take all of this in. And so I want to know somebody's gifts as well. What are the gifts you have? What are the things that make you feel alive? When are times in your life when you felt the happiest? What were you doing in those times? It's not just sort of looking at the difficult struggle, strains, or stressful times. It's looking at the good times, your gifts. There's a whole field of this coming out now, and it's got Catholics have a real opportunity here to do some philosophical and theological work in this area, but it's called positive psychology. The father of positive psychology is this guy, Martin Seligman, out of the University of Pennsylvania. And Seligman wrote a book called Flourish. And he started off with a theory of happiness, and sort of he was interested in what makes people happy. And then he transitioned to a theory of well-being. And he has these things he calls values in action, sort of like virtues, they're sort of analogous to virtues. And so like psychology discovered virtue back in like the early 2000s, like 2,500 years after Aristotle. And so that particular field is interested in what are the strengths people have? What are the good things people can do that either serve as a buffer against mental health issues, or you can have a mental health issue and still be flourishing in all these other ways. Like, the mental health issue isn't your identity. It's not the entirety of your experience. Are you creative? Are you somebody who loves service work? Are you these other things you do that fill out your sense of flourishing? Because, by the way, you can not have a mental health problem. You can not have a mental illness and still not be flourishing, right? So we need more work for Catholics to sort of translate, sift through, hone, shape, but dialogue with this field of positive psychology, because there's some really neat things coming out of positive psych. But I want to take somebody's their strengths, what makes them come alive.
Have you done the Strength Finder thing?
Never, dude. Everyone's doing it at the university.
It was such a blessing to me.
I've never done it.
And one of the things that's so appealing about Strength Finders is that it's about your strengths.
Yeah.
And finding them. Right. So that's nice, because you look at the 4 temperaments and, you're like melancholic. Well, that doesn't sound very good. Phlegmatic. Okay, fair enough. But there is something really cool about it. Yeah.
There's another thing too. I
just real quick, just for those who might be interested, one of the cool things about Strength Finders is, I think part of, and I haven't studied this, but I think the idea is there are some things that you will never be great at. So instead 100%. Of wasting your energy on those things, spend it on the things you could be great at if you would invest into those things that you're naturally good at, and then the other things will actually follow in tow. Yeah. What's interesting is you get your top 35, right? 35 strengths. It's usually the top 5 you want to look at.
Okay.
So I forget what mine are. It's like intellection, activation, empathy. These all make sense when you look them up. And the other thing that's kind of helpful when I look through these is I read some of my wives. I'm like, oh, that's definitely not me. It's not one of these things that's so general. You're like, come on, this all applies to you. Yes. Anyway, what's funny is my 35th, which is like not good, and my wife's 34th. Yeah. Discipline. Both of us. Stop. Like, come on. No wonder we can't get our crap together.
What's that mean in the meaning like
it means
not like parenting. You mean like in your own life?
In our life, we're just hopeless.
Organized.
It's like why our house is a complete disaster all the time. It's why we keep coming up with great ideas and fail to execute them consistently. Yeah. But instead of beating yourself up about that, being like, okay, this is why. Like I'm like hugely entrepreneurial.
Yes.
I'm very much an activator. I can get ideas. I can get people excited about ideas really well.
No, you're always doing that. I hear people say, Matt Fradd's doing this thing. He's buying the thing.
Right. But then I get bored with it while everybody else is like, I just started this thing. I'm like, I'm over it. New thing.
I'm on to the next thing.
So this is why I need people like Neil and Melanie and these other people who work with me in my life who can like be really great at being consistent. Because otherwise I'm just like fireworks that's there and then it's not.
My guess though, Matt, so positive psych is something very similar, which is like, it's free. You can take the values in action test. It's like 200, it's a monster to have 256 questions. There's 24 of these virtues or values in action. And it lists your top 5 or whatever. And it says, sort of research shows that if you spend deliberate time each day cultivating the thing that like the top 3, like the things you are naturally good at and bring you to life, and it increases your overall sense of well-being.
How terrific.
Like, do the things that you're good at. I mean, this isn't rocket science, right? Terrific. On one hand, but that's
what's it called again for those who might be interested in looking
it's called the VIA. So if you Google...
We're both looking at you, Neil. I've noticed that over the years, people have got a lot more demanding of Jamie on Joe Rogan's show.
Yeah, sure.
I watched this show with Mr. Beast the other day.
Yeah.
And he's just continually, look that up, Jamie. It's like he looked up 1,000 things. Like Jamie's not getting paid enough.
He's driving. Neil's driving the ship right now, dude.
What am I Googling?
Okay, so you're going to Google, let me see, you're going to Google VIA, Values in Action Test. And it should be, let's see.
I know you're going to get going here too.
So sorry about that.
No, you're great.
So sorry.
Don't be. We'll begin to wrap up.
That's it.
Positive Psychology Center.
Yes.
Maybe put a link to this in the description for folks who might want to check that out.
And you could take that. And that's another, whatever. You just.
Again, I think that is what, that's part of the impetus for Strength Finders is that it had become so much about what we suck at or what's broken within us. It's like, what if?
I know.
Just here's an idea.
I know. What if And again, that's a great way, we mentioned, talking earlier about shame and guilt, and look, we can turn so much inward, and look at all of our defects, so attentively that we fail to recognize that we do have things that bring us to life. And so being an activator, right? Like some part of what brings you to life is just like doing new things, start being entrepreneurial. And so you foster that. And yeah, of course, all of our strengths also sort of have whatever, a shadow side or right, that need to be. So like my temperament, right? I'm pretty sanguine. I need to be careful. I love telling stories. When we've been talking, my brain has been firing, Matt. I have a story about a Filipino woman who showed up at our house. When you mentioned that Filipino lady, I just want to like tell stories, right?
I see.
And I love it. And I come alive when I'm telling stories and when I have to be careful, right? I mean, that I can talk too much. I can dominate the conversation. I can talk when I should listen. I can.
Another example would be like if you've got a great sense of humor, then your good trait can be a bad trait when you use it to cut people down or be sarcastic. So I see what you mean.
100%. And so, but yet the flip side is to focus on the things we're good at. It makes me, right? I love going out and going to a gathering. I love telling a story. It's the stuff that at the end of a day, when I've had a long day, a hard day, a stressful day, we had some students over last night, and getting to just tell a story and laugh and I feel alive. I feel energized, And so to have a chance to be an activator, be an entrepreneur, do the thing you like, even if you have to you have Neil rein you in occasionally or say, hey man, let's focus a little bit more. We have to have those things in our life.
New podcast. Done with Pints with Aquinas. It's now Beers with Bonaventure.
Alex Plato would love you, man. Yeah, sure.
Well, hey, this has been terrific. Way better than I thought.
I'm sorry.
Not because I didn't think this would be great, but just because you're very insightful and very learned on all of this stuff. And you and I only know each other casually, so I haven't had a chance to sit in any of your lectures or anything, but really appreciate all the effort you've put into to know all this stuff, and God's blessing upon your upcoming endeavor with Wellspring. Tell people one more time why they should click on your YouTube link. One is so that you can have more subscribers than my son Liam. I know you and him have running gun battles.
Your son's been teasing me that he wants to have more subscribers. If I wasn't such a big magnanimous man, I would just be utterly, I would stoop down to that level and I would just crush him.
I'd be hiring people from overseas to subscribe to me as well.
You can get guys from like Pakistan to just click links, right? Well, why? I don't know. Because I enjoy it. And because there's so many questions here, right? Yeah. And because I would love to answer all of them.
Yeah. So Ask a Catholic Therapist is the name. Links in the description. Yeah. And I should probably tell my son's thing just in case.
Yeah, do it.
What are the odds, I think it's called.
Okay, cool.
He also has one with block motion. Him and your son have been creating these Lego
stop
things.
Motion stuff, dude.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I was going to come up with that name, block motion. That's good. Legos, blocks.
Entrepreneur. Are you activating?
I am right now.
Yeah, man.
And my son's like, I don't know. I'm like, shut up and listen to me. I know this is the one thing I can do well.
Put lo-fi beats behind it and just
you see this?
You have a lo-fi, like that's
what I'm talking about
right there, dude.
Yeah. Now I just need people along who can help consistently. So did you have school today?
You know what today is? Today is the faculty awards. We get to honor the best people in teaching, scholarship, and service. And part of my responsibility is to help orchestrate and organize it.
All right.
And so get Father David there, get Dr. Dan Kempton there, get all the winners, and we get to just meet as a faculty and celebrate each other, man, which is awesome.
Well, thanks for being on the show. And when your book comes out in the summer, if you would, I'd love to have you back on.
I would too, man. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Love to chop it up about
if it's
book.
Anything like what you've been sharing today, I know it's going to be a big blessing to folks. So big thanks. Okay, so if you're watching right now on the YouTubes, do me a favor. Favor? Not a word. Favor.
Smash that like button.
Look, I don't know what happens. I don't know if the like button works. I just want you to test it. I'm not sure what'll happen. I actually been thinking about giving away a Summa every month to new subscribers.
Dude.
How would we even do that?
You can just go through the list, contact them.
How would you contact them?
You have to give stuff away.
Because you just see their handle, right?
I think you can message people on YouTube.
All right.
Sure, there's a way to do it.
We want to do something like that.
How do you get new subscribers? Like, how do you... So my guess is you have a following that's a pretty set number of people. How do you get it to more people than you normally would?
Well, YouTube usually does that. Like, I think most people watch these shows because it gets recommended than people who have subscribed get a notification saying that it's on. So YouTube's like, shut up. We know what people want more than you do.
I have an algorithm.
Right.
I know.
They're right.
Can I tell you my newest? Okay.
Yeah, do it.
It's called the Hoof GP.
Okay.
It's a Scottish guy who trims cows' hooves, and all these cows have like a rocket. They'll have pus in their, and he like gets in, he elevates.
This is your YouTube
these are 8
obsession.
minute. Matt, if
I've
you
watched one of those, I think.
they are, it's 8 minutes. So it's like the sweet spot for attention, right? He shaves the hoof and then he like starts scraping and like, he's like, oh, there's blood. Like what's under? He's always getting down into like the derma or the dermis, and you get to like bandage it.
We're very different people, you and me, Matt.
So good. The algorithm knows me, Matt.
Well, you know what's funny? Like when it comes to YouTube, the stuff I listen to now. When I was a teenager, if you had said like, "Who's your favorite band?" I would have been like, the Beatles or Metallica or Pantera or a bunch of other bands I wouldn't necessarily recommend today. But now, if you're like, "What music do you listen to?" I'm like, "Oh, oldies, but it's outside and you're on a rocking chair while it's raining." Like. I'm like, that's the crap I listen to because I'm old and tired and I just want to listen to stuff that brings me down. Catholic lo-fi. Check it out.
I find myself in these like deep, like Eastern European trance hard shuffle dance videos on YouTube.
Really?
These like,
wow.
Yeah.
So it'd be funny to compare YouTube pages. Like if we had different, your computer and my computer, we just kind of went to our YouTube page.
What that says about you. A lot of UFC, a lot of hoof GP.
That is hilarious.
And then like dance videos. I love dance videos.
Dance videos, because you like to dance.
Yeah, I like that vibe.
Yeah, it was good. The other day when we were at your house dancing with our wives, I was a little, I'm embarrassed to dance because I know I'm not good at it. Not I think, but I'm actually am. No, I know I'm not.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, but I can still stand close to my wife who also believes she's bad at dancing and she's also bad. And we can just rock together while those smart ass college students are throwing each other around.
I can't do, Get out of here. I will say I don't, I've dabbled with some of like the more formal foxtrot, sort of, but there's something I love just about the freedom of like moving and just a vibe. It's just a vibe, dude. You put a song on.
Why are black people better at dancing?
It is, man. I don't know. It's
true. Why is it true?
I don't know. Maybe it's cultural.
Like if you trained me for the next 20 years and told me you'd give me...
I bet I could. Really? I bet I could. If I took you and Alex Plato, I bet...
Oh my gosh, me and Alex are probably on par for how awkward we are.
Sounds like an early 2000s like... comedy setup. Oh yeah, can Matt learn how to dance?
It's like White Man Can't Jump. Dude. Is that what it's called? White Man? White Man Can't Dance.
Give me 6 months, and I feel like I could at least get you guys bobbing your head on the beat. Just with
take us with what we've got and just work on that. I'll tell you who is a white kid who can dance, and that is Cirilla's kid. What is with that?
Who? Which one?
Little kid, maybe that big.
Oh, George.
Yeah. He's walking around. He's doing these things, and my wife and I are like, we just missed the memo.
It's in him. It's deep.
All right. Well, subscribe. After all I do for you, it's the least you can do. I command it.
He'll dance.
Do it now.
He will dance for you.
I will dance. No, I won't. I won't do that. And we'll have you on the show.
You'll just do a dance video.
He's a great dancer. I watched this show with my son the other day. You can just stand up and leave if you need to go. I know that I keep prolonging this. Just stand up and leave.
We got 8 minutes.
But have you ever watched Napoleon Dynamite?
Yes.
Love that show.
That
He's
final
brilliant.
dance.
I love it. Apparently they did that whole thing in one take.
Really? I have a little cousin who learned that dance and just...
Oh, really?
It's masterful at the end there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's such a good movie. When that first came out, I'm living in Australia, right? Aussie humor, American humor is different. Somebody said to me, this is funnier than Dumb and Dumber. And Dumb and Dumber is like the litmus test for me. Not so much anymore, but it was the funniest thing I'd ever watched. And I watched it and just... did not understand it. Didn't laugh.
Matt, I walked out of the theater.
Did you?
Can I tell you, that movie is so weird for me because I walked out of the theater because I thought it wasn't funny. I tried to watch it twice at home. I couldn't get through it. I finally watched it with a friend. I didn't laugh. And then I've spent the next 25 years or whatever, 20 years, just recounting it and laughing really hard. It's one of these movies that I talk about and I laugh. I could throw this football over them, their mountains.
Oh my gosh.
I laugh so hard, but in the moment I didn't. But it's so funny when I talk about it to me.
All right, best line. I got a best line. What's your best line from Napoleon Dynamite?
It's when Uncle Rico basically intimates that he can throw a football over the mountain in the distance. He's like, bet I can throw this football over that mountain over there. And the mountain's like, a mile and a half. Anyway,
I think one of mine is... Tina, you fat piece of lard, come and get your dinner. He has to feed the llama.
Or La Fonda. You never see La Fonda's like this big black woman who's dating.
And she gradually changes him, and he's wearing the do rag and the gold medal chain.
Or
peace,
Who's the Rex Kwon Do.
Oh my gosh.
When he's like, that's the kind of woman I'm married to. And he's like, come on, kick me. Blocked it.
You think anybody wants a roundhouse kick to the face while I'm wearing these bad boys? I don't think so.
And when I watched it, I didn't laugh, but I find it so funny when I talk about it. Man.
It's so understated.
What a weird.
It's so funny.
My favorite is just the last shot. For some reason, really got me, where it's like zooming out and they're playing the tetherball.
Tetherball. Yeah.
And then they're just like playing casually, and it's supposed to be like sweet, and then he just starts like absolutely
slamming it.
Yeah.
I actually kind of cried a little bit watching. I teared up. I guess there's a difference. I didn't sob, but I got moisty-eyed when I watched that dance scene. It's just something beautiful. It's just something beautiful about, like, as somebody who, I think a lot of us feel this to some degree, just like on the outside, looking in at everybody else who seems to have it all down, and you're not sure how they figured that out, and you're wondering what meeting you should have went to but didn't. There's something beautiful about watching two awkward people just like love each other and find each other. There was that moment where they were dancing together at the prom.
Oh,
man, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Matt,
That's a beautiful song.
I think I sort of joke with my student, but I mean this sort of seriously. There's some dimension of the beatific vision. This is going to rub some people the wrong way, that I imagine, though, to be like a big dance, like a big... What I mean by that,
it's gonna be great for you. Me and Plato are gonna be
dying on the
purgatory.
But it's this thing you're talking about. Some part of it is, at least some of the principles of dance, it's like freedom. There's a vulnerability.
Yeah.
When you're dancing, there's the insecurities. Like when you're really dancing, letting go of the insecurities, and just there's sort of a vulnerability of freedom and anticipation. And so it's really that. It's like what that captures for me particularly, and that's going to be different for everyone. But when you mention that, I mean, there's something about dance scenes or dance that I touches in a lot of people that desire for like to be me, to sort of be vulnerable, to be not feel so restrained or inhibited. Yeah. What was the last movie you watched where you cried?
Oh, I cry almost at every movie. What's the last movie I cried at? It's a great question. Do you have one in mind?
No. I'm trying to think for myself.
Oh, most things bring me to tears.
I'll tell you what. Encanto made me cry. The scene in Encanto, the Disney one with, it's beautiful. Anyway, I cried.
I tell you, this is embarrassing, but me and the kids had a great night the other night. I love music, and my wife isn't very musical, so she doesn't kind of get it in the way I get it, but me and the kids love it. And so I put my phone on this Bluetooth, and we me and all the kids like chose a song, and we all had to listen to it.
It's awesome.
And so I'm making them listen to one of my favorite bands, Augie March. That's my American accent. Augie March. They're brilliant. But my daughters were like, they played, is it Romeo and Juliet by Taylor Swift? Is that what it's called?
Never heard of it. No,
what's that?
Know.
You know that? You and Romeo, you were throwing pebbles, and my daddy said, stay away from Juliet. Not done yet.
Wait, I'm getting to the
Anyway, I was crying. This is so beautiful. And I get it. It's Taylor Swift. It was probably manufactured in a high-rise in Manhattan, and it's really not that great. But but it was also something beautiful about my daughters loving the sort of music that daughters should like, about being beautiful and being seen and being wanted. Man, it was lovely.
That's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
All right.
I really like that song.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, so
there's like a line that's Romeo, save me, I've been feeling so alone. I don't know. I think it's a good song.
I want to. Yeah. Nailed it. Yes, I know it.
Yeah,
I know it.
Anyway,
right.
Sweet.
We'll do it again.
That'd be great.
We'll do it again.